Louise and Dr. Thomas
Here.
and Louise Dempsey joining us virtually. And we do have a forum.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Mike Casserly and Ray Hart. And happy to have you join us again. And floor is yours.
All right, happy to be here. Hopefully everyone can hear us. Mike and I are happy to share. I'm going to start this morning by sharing a PowerPoint with you, and then we'll go through kind of an exercise to really, our objective for today is to really get you to a place of consensus, as we talked about last week, on your vision and your values for the school district, where you think the school district needs to go, so that you're clear about that as you go into the search process. And so we talked about that last week. We'll pick that up today. What I've done is asked if I could take about an hour of your time to really make you mad at me. So I think after this first hour, you're going to look at Ann and say, why did you invite that guy? Don't ever invite him back again, because I'm going to inundate you with data. And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about why. Why does the data look that way? Why is it? What's the explanation behind it? So I'm really going to push you. You thought you were coming to a school board meeting. We're going to have a party. We're going to have fun with data. But I'm going to do that on purpose, because what we want to do is kind of establish for everyone, where is the district now, and then where do you see the district? And then we'll go into a set of questions that we'll ask and we'll ask you to respond to. For those who are online, we will use the chat function to ask you to respond via chat as well. So we'll dive in. So without further ado, I will dive right in. Michael Casserly, who is joining as well. I'm going to ask Mike, if he doesn't mind, to just chime in, weigh in at any point he likes during the presentation or during the discussion. So we'll just piggyback off of each other as we go. So I'm going to.
Right. Does that mean that I chime in when they like you or when they don't?
When they don't like me, you can chime in.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there a way to back to the zone?
Just share whole screen.
All right. So what we want to do to start, as I shared, is just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and all seeing the school district through the same lens. So essentially ensuring that everyone can feel free to stop me at any point, ask questions, but I want to make sure we're all seeing the district next steps all through the same lens. So I want to start by just sharing some information that we often collect just to set the context for the data that I'm going to share. These are council member school districts, and this is the percentage of households in our council member school districts on the last U.S. Census. So it's actually a 5-year average of the American Community School Survey. I'm going to see if I can minimize this so you can see this over to the right. So we're going to put your video off to the right a little bit. But this is what our school districts look like. And the reason I share this information is I want to start by just giving you a perspective of what the new superintendent is coming into. So you're actually hiring a superintendent to work with the school districts, the school students in Cleveland. As you all know already, and I don't have to share with you, the students in Cleveland Municipal School District are 100% free and reduced price lunch. But one of the things that we do, there's a report that we have on our website is called Mirrors or Windows. And do our districts reflect the students that they serve, meaning that the students that they serve are just a reflection of their performance, or are they windows? Do they provide opportunities for students beyond what the student population looks like? And so we control for things like poverty and race and ethnicities, special needs status, et cetera. We control for those in the report. And the reason we do is because of this. And one of the things that there's a chapter in that report, really a section of that report, where we deal with the notion of abject poverty. So not just poverty, but abject poverty. And this is the percentage of households in the district. So in the school district, this is across all of our districts, that make less than 10,000 a year, that make between 10,000 and 14,000, make between 15 and 24,000, and then adding all of those up, those total that are 25,000 or less in terms of households. As you'll note, Puerto Rico is highest at about 56%. Right behind Puerto Rico is Cleveland at 41% overall. Behind Cleveland is Detroit, Dayton, Toledo, et cetera. So it goes on. But what you notice from this list, and this is in rank order, you'll see, for example, Cincinnati Public Schools is down here at about 30% of their population. Pittsburgh is down here at about 27%. And this is just the population in the school district. So the variable is not the city. It's not the city, it's just the school district boundaries. Is everyone with me? So it's just the boundaries of the school district. You'll see Philadelphia there at about 28%. I share this with you to share that, and I'll share why in a minute, but you can see where Cleveland is. This is actually a study that was done in the District of Columbia Public Schools. And I share this with you to share just conceptually what you were looking at on the previous slide. What they've done in Washington, D.C., and this was done in 2017, so it's pre-pandemic. But what they've done in Washington, D.C. is they've said, we want to identify students who are at risk as being homeless, being in the foster care system, being qualified for food stamps, being qualified for TANF, or overage for their grade level. And what they did is said, let's look at the performance of those students who are at risk against other factors. They looked at white, Black, Latino, but they also looked at, right here on the third row, free and reduced price lunch. And what you'll notice is that free and reduced price lunch is actually not a very good measure of true poverty and the true impacts of poverty on students and student outcomes. The at-risk group here, you'll see ELA. This is the free and reduced price lunch performance in Washington, D.C. It's about 0.59, which is on PARC. These are on their state test score. So PARC was their state test score. But you'll notice that the at-risk students, what we call abject poverty, those students who are really truly at risk, their performance was lower than even the students who were free and reduced price lunch. Also lower than students who were African-American, Latino, et cetera. You can see how it goes. Even lower than ELLs, lower than special ed. These students who were deemed as at risk had the lowest performance in ELA and math in the district. I say that to say that you are hiring a superintendent to work with students and to overcome the impacts and the effects of poverty. That is your challenge is to hire a superintendent that has the greatest percentage of those students and families in the school district of all our districts. So there are challenges across all our member districts. New York City obviously is a big member district. Los Angeles is a big member district. But Cleveland, the challenge in Cleveland, you'll see Toledo is here as well. Toledo and Dayton are right behind Detroit. But the challenge of educating students who are in poverty is the challenge that you're asking your superintendents to take on. And that challenge is also, I think, as a community, what we know is that in order to improve the community, at least my personal belief, so I'm going to be biased, my personal belief is that education is the way to overcome that for our students. Now, you've asked the council to come in and work with you. And the reason I said you're not going to tell Ann never to invite me back again. I'm going to share with you from this point forward a lot of data about student achievement. Because as a council, our number one goal, our main priority is student outcomes. Everything else to us is secondary. First and foremost, what we're about is changing student outcomes in these school districts. And what we recognize is that in order to do that, it really takes a wealth of supports in order to do that. Share with you now kind of some data about the district, but I want to set this context for what you're asking the superintendent to do, what you're looking for in a superintendent, and that is someone who is going to come in and say, okay, I recognize the challenges of educating students in poverty, but I am willing to embrace those challenges and I'm willing to put procedures, processes in place to overcome those impacts.
Ray,
So-
can I just
Absolutely.
make one comment back on this
You
first
come
grade?
in
So, I mean,
At any point.
as a quick backdrop, so I do demographics for PNC, like, so similar things, not education. And one thing that stands out to me here is that Columbus is like not on the list. So our other big sister city,
Yes, Columbus is actually
Because
below
it-
Pittsburgh. It
because
is
we don't
on,
have,
it's on the list, but it's down
Yeah.
below. I think Columbus was 25% total
correct.
poverty. But I want to point out two things to you. The first of which is not just this total below 25.
Yeah.
I cut you off. I apologize. But also look at the percentage of families who are less than $10,000 a year. That is abject poverty. That percentage is higher than most of our other districts.
Right,
Go
right,
ahead.
and I fully understand that, but my point is just that, we tend to look at like the Big Eight or Ohio, but we really are all different, and Columbus, which maybe gets a lot of attention being the #1 school district, just has a different set of circumstances like Pittsburgh or like, they're not higher up the list.
You're correct. Absolutely. And Columbus, like I said, Columbus it's actually on the list. I blew this up so you could actually read the numbers. But right below this is Columbus. I can come back to it.
No, my only, 25 versus 40 is like a world difference.
It is. Absolutely.
So in the report, DC is credited as being the fastest improving district at that time when it was published.
Mhm.
Where did it fall under where you had to cut off its list?
For this list,
Yeah.
DC is right below here. So I can actually pull up the whole list. And maybe I didn't. DC. Why didn't DC should be on here and I don't see them. They're there. I'll pull it up. They're in there.
Thank you.
There's
They're in there.
Columbus. Yeah.
Here's Columbus down
Yeah.
here. So DC is probably down below this because this is a rank order. So DC might be a little below that. The interesting thing about DC, which is different from Cleveland as well, the Northwest, a number of our districts around the country are like this. The Northwest side of DC is probably the most affluent area of the entire country. So part of the District of Columbia Public Schools is really, really affluent. And another part is really, really high poverty. So that is another thing that makes our districts very different. So I say all that to set the stage
Well, I
for.
would say that our Northwest is very affluent
Really,
here too.
yeah.
I think just don't separate it that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I say all that to set the context for what you're asking the superintendent to do. Now, what I want to share now is just data. So I'm again sharing backdrop. We talked about poverty. We said poverty was an important factor in educating kids. So I'm going to share with you some NAEP data. I'm going to share with you some Cleveland data. I want to start with some broader national NAEP data, and then I'll just drill down into where Cleveland is relative to that. One of the first things I want to share with you, and I share this quite often, like to look at the NAEP data, and this is 2022, so I just updated this, but I'll go back in history. But this is 2022 data. And what I like to do is graph for folks the performance of low-income students. So this is just low-income students, just to give you perspective, but this is just low-income students across the country. But we've broken it out by large city students who are not in charter schools, large city students who are in charter schools, national public students who are not in charter schools, and national public students who are in charter schools. So you got large city, national public. The real differences are here. Not charters are 68% free and reduced price lunch. Charters are 72% free and reduced price lunch. Non-charters for the national public is 51 and national public is 62. These are the percentages of kids, students who are below basic, at basic, proficient, and at advanced on the NAEP math 4th grade assessment. Notice any differences there? Those are dramatically different from each other, right? Yeah, 2.1%, 1.1, 2.3, 2.7. Remember, I said we were going to have a party. I said we were going to have fun, and I was going to ask you lots of questions about why. Are all these different? No. Aren't some students doing better than others on that chart? Or aren't some school types doing better than others? So if you look at just low income students, and I'll show you this was 2019. So this was 2022, this is post-pandemic, this is pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, this is the same breakout, large city, not a charter, et cetera. 2.7, 2.6, 2.9, 2.8. All of those are about identical. All of these are about identical. All of these are about identical. All of these are about identical. I share that to connect to the previous two slides that I just shared on poverty. And I share that to say that it doesn't matter in America where kids go to. Kids who are low income, this is just free and reduced price lunch. Remember I said there's a difference between abject poverty and free and reduced price lunch. This is free and reduced price lunch. So this is low income is measured by free and reduced price lunch. It doesn't matter where kids in America go to school who are in poverty. The issue is that the challenge is that everyone struggles with educating students who are in poverty. Everyone does. No one's figured it out. No one has the answer. We're all working to figure that out. Is it possible? Yes, and I'll show you that in a minute. But everyone struggles with that across the board. Now I have private school on here, but you notice private school was missing from 22 and 2019. And private school, the last time private schools took NAEP to give us an estimate of what private school performance looks like, the last time they took NAEP with large enough sample sizes to calculate was in 2013. Here is private schools. They're about 10% free and reduced price lunch students, but that's the performance of private schools. Still different, right? So students who are in poverty should go to private schools because they're going to provide a better educational opportunity, right?
I mean, the only thing that stands out here is that below basic, which is 10% percentage points higher than large city public schools.
There's a study, I didn't put the study in here, but there's a study that was done in the DeVos administration, and students were randomly given vouchers to go to private schools in DC. This is students in poverty. Were given vouchers to go to private schools in DC. Some went to state, didn't get the voucher and stayed in their public school. The students who randomly received vouchers to go to private school could score significantly lower than the kids who stayed in the public school. These were kids in poverty who randomly got vouchers, but they were significantly lower. They were lower in both math and reading. I think one math was significantly lower.
Are private schools independent and parochial? Or
they're independent and parochial. So this includes Catholic schools and independent schools. So it's both. But essentially, I only say that to say that again, I'm setting the context for your understanding of the superintendent that you're hiring. Is everyone with me? I'm going to skip through these slides pretty quickly because I only have an hour and I got a lot of slides to go through, but this is math, 8th grade. So again, 8th grade math, low income students in 2022. These are basically what the bars look like, advanced, proficient, etc. This is 2019, that was private schools, basically all the same. All these are going to look identical. Reading, grade 4, and reading grade 4 for 2019, and then private school. All right, this is reading grade 8, and this was the only place where private school is higher in reading, and that was in 2013. I have a reason why I think that's the case, but that's the only place it was higher.
Actually, before you give the reason why you think it was a case in 2013, did that study that you mentioned from 2019 give a reason why they thought it was a case that if the random vouchers that were given out, students performed lower in the...
They didn't give a reason. It was a Department of Education report, so they were just reporting on kind of the facts, but they didn't offer opinions about why they thought it was the case. Does that make sense?
What's your opinion?
What's my opinion on why the students do poor? My opinion is worth a grain of salt, but I think it does it again. One of the things, at least for our schools, because our school districts, and in our report that we provided, that we published about a year and a half ago, what we showed is that our districts have far more educational torque, if you will, and I'll show you that actually in the next couple of slides. Educational torque being our ability to move kids from where they are to get them better is higher in urban public schools because we're used to working with students with challenges. I can give you the best example I can give you, and this goes back a ways. I went to school back in the 80s when there was a minority majority busing process. And literally I grew up on the south side of town, and kids got on the bus at 5:30 in the morning to get bused around to the north side of town to go to school. And they were in honors English classes in our schools. My school was 100% African American. They were in honors English classes with me. The next year they decided I'm going to go to the North Side schools. Where do you think they got tracked when they went to the North Side schools? North Side schools were all white. Where do you think they ended up getting tracked? Tracking, I know, is not a good thing, but what do you think happened to them?
Not ours.
It wasn't honors. And so essentially what happens, and take kids who are in poverty, put them in private schools. A lot of times they say, we don't have high expectations for what the students can do. So that those lower expectations actually play out in performance, but that's an opinion. I've seen it in schools, but I can't say that's the case for the whole nation because I haven't studied it, but that's just an opinion. In this case, I think there's something else going on. I won't get into it because it's not relevant. Essentially, that was the last time we had that. Does that help?
Yeah. We have stories like that where Black families move out to Sullivan for better opportunities and they end up bringing their children.
Bring them
I
back.
haven't heard those stories, but Sullivan is, a high performing district of Ohio. And then Black boys get trapped and they bring them right back to CMSD.
Right. So
Because the cultural competence is there.
So this one, again, this is to set the stage. This is actually Ohio. I took, this is the only slide I haven't updated to 2022. So I apologize about that. This was in 2014, but I don't suspect this is any different. But this is the graduation rates for 2014 for about 16 Ohio districts. And I kind of pulled randomly out of all of Ohio districts. How would you rank those districts? And the state does a ranking as well, but how would you rank those school districts? Who's doing well, who's doing not? Because this is how we rank high schools, right? And school districts on graduation rate. So you got, how would you rank those districts? So this is District 1 through District 16.
Sorry, what do those numbers represent? That's just
So,
a
yeah.
number they're assigned.
This is a number, it's a random number that I assign them as District 1, District 2, District 3 through 16. And then this is the graduation rate for those school districts. These are all Ohio districts.
So you're asking, what grade would you give to, let's say, District 9? Is that
Yep.
the question?
What grade would you give District 9? You got 96% graduation rate. What grade would you give?
I would probably give it an A.
And hey, how are they doing educating their kids?
I mean, if I look at this, Ohio probably says they're doing great.
Yeah, they're doing great. Okay. How about District 10? 68% graduation rate. How are they doing educating their kids?
Yeah, Ohio probably said they're a D or an E.
D or D? I like that, D or D. What I did, and again, I'm making you sit through this just so you get a perspective. What I did is I took in 2019, and the state of Ohio has a kindergarten readiness test. You all familiar with that? So I took for these exact same school districts in the exact same year. So I didn't go back 10 years. I just took 2014 and I plotted the kindergarten readiness rate for districts for kids coming into the district against the kindergarten rate, against the graduation rate. Does that make sense? These same districts, that's what it looks like. So the green bar is the kindergarten readiness rate for all of those districts, same 16. The graduation rate is the orange bar still. This is the difference between essentially, now these kids are not the same kids. So these kids are 13 years apart in school. But that's essentially what the districts look like in terms of graduation rate and kindergarten readiness rate. Remember I talked a few minutes ago about educational torque. So I talked about really moving kids. Essentially, the districts that have the greatest challenges in terms of income in the state of Ohio actually move kids more than the districts that get kids to automatically come in. And you see this District 7, 94% graduation rate, 94% kindergarten readiness. Does that make sense? So I want to set the stage for this is what you're asking. What you're asking the superintendent to do is actually, hey, help us continue to move our students and continue to close those gaps. So that brings us to Cleveland. So let's talk a little bit about Cleveland. So Cleveland has, this is your most recent rating. So these are Cleveland State ratings. So achievement component, star rating was a 2. Progress component, 4. Gap closing component, 4. Graduation component, star rating, 1. Early literacy component, star rating, 1. Do those numbers make sense? Where is it coming from?
Where's what?
What do you think is generating those numbers? Help me explain. Why is Why is the
Yeah, so
graduation
students that are
component
coming
one?
from poor families are not yet ready to read, so early literacy is down.
Okay.
In Cleveland, because, you know, we're saying that. Again, what you just showed us, right?
Can I chime in? Can I chime in?
Absolutely, Lisa,
Ray,
go
you
ahead.
said kindergarten readiness rate is an indicator of high school graduation.
No, it's not.
So
Nope, that's not what I said.
that's not what you said?
Well, all I
That's what the
said
data
was,
says.
here's the kindergarten readiness rate against the high school graduation rate. Not that it's, you can interpret what I said as an indicator, but yes, it is, they are correlated, let's put it that way.
But you also said that kids do better in urban public schools because teachers know how to educate kids with challenges. And that's what the progress component and gap closing component, I think, represent.
Yeah.
Torque is the new word I learned today.
I can like torque, I'm sorry, I use torque. But Mike and I use torque in the report, so that's, I like to use that word, but essentially, you're exactly right. It's what Cleveland is producing, it's what you've produced. When I share that, I share this to say, your new superintendent is coming into a district where the cupboard is not bare. You know, we talk about the cupboard being bare, the cupboard is not bare. But these are the real challenges that the superintendent will face. Is everyone with me?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be brutally honest with you about the data, about where you are, about what's happening, so that you can best say, all right, now, if this is what the data says, then what are our next steps? What do we expect from our next superintendent, and where are we going? Your educational torque, essentially, as Lisa just shared, is extremely high. The achievement, and it's not to say that students in poverty can't achieve. That is not what I'm saying at all. So I'm not saying that those kindergarten readiness levels are indicative of what you should expect in a graduation rate. So that's not what I'm saying at all. Every child can learn, every child can be successful. The question is, how do we get there? Right, so we'll talk more about that. Here's some of the other data that shows that the cupboard is not bare. So what this data shows, and I'll move this down a little bit so you all can see. This is your most recent data, and we just summarized it. I looked at all of your grade levels. I looked at third grade achievement. I looked at English language arts. I looked at math. I looked at science. Looked at algebra 1, geometry, English 2. I looked across all your students, your Hispanic students, your Black students, your white students. Looked across everything, and then going through all of that data, I've got all those. Rate in the state of Ohio in all of the grades and testing subject areas that you see here. So grade 5 ELA Hispanic students are faster in Ohio. Grade 6 ELA Black students are faster in Ohio. Grade 7 ELA, all students, Black students, Hispanic students, and white students are all faster in Ohio. Is everybody with me? What's noticeably missing from that list? What jumps out at you on that list? There's a pattern there, and there's some things that are missing from that list. Anybody tell what it is? Remember I said I'm gonna grill you, because you got to tell me what the data says.
Third grade reading.
Third grade reading. All right, so third grade reading is missing. What else is missing?
All students in certain buckets,
Okay,
like 5,
all-
6, then math 6, 7.
All students in certain buckets, so it's kind of hit or miss sometimes at grade levels. But third grade reading, so third grade reading,
Fourth
All
grade reading,
students-
second grade, anything.
fourth
below.
grade reading, second grade reading, what else?
Yeah, anything in early literacy, and then
High school.
I'm seeing, yeah, like there's no algebra 2 on there.
All right, there's no algebra 2. Algebra 2 wasn't one of the tests. It's not one of the
Okay.
tests, so it's just algebra and geometry. Algebra 2 is not
Yeah.
one of the tests. So I got third grade, I got early literacy. How about math? What's missing in math?
Yeah, same.
Same, third grade, why? So third grade, fourth grade, math, literacy, they're all on this list. Why do you think third and fourth grade are missing versus 5, 6, 7, 8 high school?
Too hard to do virtual.
Yeah, you can't want to read virtual.
Well, is it just reading virtually?
No, it's
Math.
math too.
So what happened during the pandemic? Everybody had to log on virtually, right? Who Who are these third graders? The third graders and the fourth graders, where were they 2 years ago? Kindergarten, first grade,
Yeah.
second grade. So now now you're growing faster than the rest of the state at every grading subject except in the early elementary grades. Why? Because those early elementary grades were impacted most by what? By COVID, by the pandemic. Are you with me? So the kids who were older, the kids who actually had some inkling about knowing how to read, the kids who were able to log in and kind of reconnect. I'm already comfortable with the computer. I can log in, I can reconnect. Now, we had lots of kids that disconnect, don't get me wrong. We had lots of kids during the pandemic who didn't get a connection, but the kids who were already there a little bit, all right, they kind of hung on. And across large cities and across NAEP overall, large city school districts are not significantly different than where they were in grade 8 reading. They're not significantly different on NAEP than where they were in 2019. Today, we're the only school districts in the country that held steady. Are you with me? But it's because of, again, the additional torque that large cities provide, but then also those older students we were able to connect with. The younger students, the greatest losses in large city school districts, which I'll show you in a minute. Fourth grade math for us was greater than us and the rest of the country. Does that make sense? It's bad for everyone, but it's the rest of the country. Again, these questions. So I'm asking you to think through what does the data say so that you can begin to get a feel for what is it we're going to ask of our next superintendent, and what is our next superintendent going to be faced with? Is everyone with me?
So Ray,
Absolutely.
could I make an additional point about this concept of educational torque? So I think Ray explained this well, but I just wanted to emphasize it because this is the ability of the school district to overcome or to mitigate poverty and these other variables on the overall performance of kids. So it's the school district's ability to score higher, or for its students to score higher than you would otherwise expect because of the poverty level in the school district. I think everybody knows that there's lots of studies historically that point to the strong correlation between poverty and student performance. What we're referring to in talking about educational torque is your ability as a school district to score higher than you would otherwise expect given the demographics of the kids. So this is what we mean by kind of educational torque or educational efficiency or effectiveness.
And thank you, Mike. Thank you for adding that clarity. And I didn't put any slides or any information from that report here. If you go to the report, we actually have Cleveland outlined, and you can see how Cleveland got better over the years at that educational torque measure. Does that make sense? So over the years, you've gotten better. So yes, third grade, early elementary, early literacy. In the middle grades, we've got different things going on, obviously, but I'm going to show you kind of some slides just to give you a good feel for what that looks like. So what we have here is, again, seventh grade. So I couldn't go through everything, but I just looked at seventh grade ELA. But we have got all students, Black students, Hispanic students, and white students. So you see that seventh grade ELA, Cleveland is recovering faster than the rest of the state for all these students, for all student groups. So seventh grade looks good. Now, there are two things going on in this slide. And I want to point that out because it's important. Because these two things are the two things that you're going to ask your superintendent to do. The first of which is, how are we recovering from the pandemic? What else is embedded in this slide that's important for you to know? You're recovering faster, but what was the case in 2019 for all of your students anyway? I'll give you a hint. It was tied to the fact that I started with poverty, so I led with poverty. And why did I lead with poverty? Because your students, and even in 2019, were what compared to the rest of the state?
Below average.
They were already below the rest of the state. So there's two things embedded in this. The first of which is I've got to recover from the pandemic. But even when I recover from the pandemic, I'm still not where I want to be. Is everyone with me? Because recovery from the pandemic, just simple recovery from the pandemic doesn't get me to that second place of being at the same place as the rest of the state for my student population. So there's two things going on, and there's two things you're gonna ask the superintendent to do: recover and recover better than where we were in 2019. Is everyone with me?
Can I
Alright.
just say something?
Absolutely.
So I don't think we've agreed to what we're gonna ask the superintendent to do yet. I think these are good things to consider.
We're gonna-
One thing that, we've talked a lot about is gap closing and like the idea of bringing students up higher than we would expect students in that demographic, whether it's an economic or racial demographic. And I, for one, would really like to push far past that. And I think it's wonderful and important that we've worked well to close the gaps. But I would like to stop celebrating that and start getting to the next level of achievement. And I think you were getting at it with like being at the same place as other, some other Ohio districts, but like, I just really want to get through gap closing and start thinking achievement. I don't want to keep recovering from this, recovering from that. I think our students deserve much more than that. And if they're out in the world up against people who are already at high achievement, they
gotta compete.
they're competing for jobs, competing for quality of life, competing for civic participation, all of these things. And gap closing is not enough for that. And thinking of students with challenges versus an environment that's going to facilitate achievement is where I'd really like for us to start framing our conversation.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. You'll have that opportunity. So we'll get to, I'm taking you quickly. I said I would take an hour to set the stage, but taking you quickly to a place where you can begin to say, here's what our expectations are. And here's where so I'll go quickly through the next set of slides, but it's just to reiterate the point from that first chart. This was 7th grade, so that's the middle school students. This was 3rd grade ELA. So you mentioned that 3rd grade ELA was missing from that list. This is the state's recovery from the pandemic on 3rd grade ELA, and this is Cleveland. Make sense?
So just to Sarah's point as well, right? Just as a to setting up the next stage. This is the thing that I'm really concerned about, because this is what is the indicator that is going to be the challenge for the next decade, right? Because in some sense, if you go back to the chart a couple of slides ago, and you said all these things are, recovery is better. Well, recovery again, it goes to your point about students that come in better prepared, do better in school, right? That's the point you were making with the kindergarten reading readiness test and graduation rates. This is the same exact thing, right? I mean, the 5th grade tests were okay because the students who were already in 3rd grade by the time they went into remote learning, they were able to recover better into 5th grade. But this group of students who started kindergarten and 1st grade during the pandemic are going to be behind the entire time they're in school unless there is something that changes.
Unless there's what?
Unless there's something, again, that chart needs to come in and help, right? And again, if I can just layer in one more thing, because this goes to Sarah's achievement question, right? If I put on my hat in my day job, right? This is exactly what we're seeing, right? I mean, the students that come into Cleveland State and were as freshmen, what we are anticipating as a university is that for the next 10 years, we're going to see students who are coming in as freshmen who are not going to be ready for college on day one. So we are thinking about what should be, and that's not just CMSD, right? That's anybody that's coming from anywhere into Cleveland State. We are getting ready to think about how are we going to support those students who have gone through their early years, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, through the pandemic. So this is the challenge, right? I mean, the previous slides are great. That's actually good news, but really this is where we need to be framing the conversation of how are we going to take those Hispanic students that are doing 20% behind the rest of the world in terms of recovering from the pandemic, and how are we going to get them ready for their reading in 2 years.
So I'll say two things. The first thing I'll say is I agree. The second thing I'll say though is that I differ in this regard. I think educational torque and what we can do educationally, we actually can make a difference in the lives of our students. And that's what you're asking the superintendent to do. What you're not saying is it's going to take us 10 years and these kids will never catch up. What you're actually saying is, what do we need to do as a system to make sure that our kids not only recover, but recover and are better than where they were before? And so so I agree, but I'm saying to you, push the superintendent, push the system to say, nope, we can recover and we can be better. And I'll give you one prime example. One of the districts that two districts actually, Birmingham and Dallas ISD. Dallas ISD this year, their African-American students perform better at every grade in reading, in English language arts on their state tests. They performed better this year than they did in 2019, pre-pandemic, at every grade except one. They're already better now than they were pre-pandemic. Does that make sense? And what I'm sharing that with you, this is African-American students, English language arts in Dallas. Birmingham is the same way. Birmingham kind of boosts everything. I'm saying that to say that you want someone who can bring in the educational torque necessary to move kids to not only close the gap to address this issue, but to move kids forward. I'm sharing it with you for the exact same reasons you pointed out, so that you're all clear about here's the issue and here's what we're asking the superintendent to do. Does that make sense? Is that
No, yeah, got it, yeah.
all right? So I'll go quickly through these so we can get to the conversation. This is 8th grade math. So that was English language arts, just as an example. This is 8th grade math. Again, not a good story. This is you and the state. You're not significantly different from the state in these. But again, this is how far students are from where they were in 2019 on 8th grade math. This is where they are now compared to where they were. Does that make sense? So that's what you're asking the superintendent to do. This is 7th grade math, just to give you a good feel. Same thing, Hispanic and white is a little different. 6th grade math, and then you notice what happens in 3rd grade math. Again, 3rd grade math is consistent for all your students kind of across the board. All right, and this is 4th grade math. All right, want to look at some NAEP data really quickly, and then we'll get into why we really came. So thank you for letting me take a little less than an hour. So I'm short of it. I'll be short of an hour by the time we finish. So this is NAEP. And what I wanted to do is just share with you the last picture. This is grade 4 reading in NAEP. And I'm going to show you a couple of other things. You can't see some of these slides. I'll tell you why. Black and Black low income are actually the exact same line. They're basically on top of each other. So that's why you can't see them. They're actually here. But I just wanted to show you, this is white students in Cleveland. This is grade 4 reading. This is your Black low income students. Or Black students. And then this is your Hispanic students. This is what Cleveland did kind of over the years. So this is a trajectory over the course of time. Just want you to see that trajectory. All of this, so all of these scores, so this line, and this line is all a function of what? Pandemic. That's all a function of the pandemic. This is not what the school district did. This is not what schools did. This is what the pandemic did. Is everyone with me? This is grade 8 reading. So grade 8 reading didn't change as much as math did, but this is grade 8 reading. So you'll see again the impacts of the pandemic. This is grade 4 math. That's your white students, low income students, Black. This is Hispanic low income, Black low income. That's essentially, so grade 4 math. That's essentially kind of pandemic. I'll show you some other things. Go ahead.
So, I mean, with the population breakdown of CMSD's population, knowing that the district has been predominantly Black, I don't even know for how long. I think it's somewhere around 69% now, 65%. And you're showing us charts from 2003 to present year where white students have always excelled higher.
They have, but it's just where everyone is. So yes, your objective, you notice here. So you notice here between 17 and 19, the gap closed pretty significantly for Hispanic students and African American students compared to white students. So you were, again, making
But to me,
progress,
that's not gap.
closing.
To me, yeah, so I guess for me, I'm expressing sadness that,
Yeah,
again, every chart that you've showed us, there's never been a gap closing between our Hispanic and Black students and their
that is
white.
correct. I can show you.
And
Yep.
so I guess this is where I get very,
Or upset.
I'll censor myself, concerned that we do celebrate achievement gap so much in Cleveland. And that is a rhetoric that is spread around our community. But when people try to refer to this type of data, we are kind of silenced out by those who, this is real data to me. Because I know what it feels like to go to college unprepared with a Cleveland education and what that looks like in your student loan. I paid for the classes to get caught up. I paid for remedial classes in Northwest DC at Howard University because I was a Cleveland kid, right? You pay for it. And so what gap have we closed?
It is the reason I get up and go to work every day.
Yeah, so I mean,
It's the reason that I've done it for the last 30 years. I worked in schools and school districts. I had a choice. I could have gone and worked, I could have been an engineer and worked in engineering my whole career. I chose to go into education for that reason.
I mean, a similar story. I wish I had done something more.
Yeah. So,
But
the challenge, and that's again, that gap closing. So you talk about, hey, this has been a consistent line for 22 years, for 20 years. So this for 2 decades, that gap has existed.
But even with a global pandemic, even though we saw a drop,
The gap is still.
Yeah, so for me, it's like a global pandemic doesn't even shake up racism, right? Like what can we do?
The reason we're doing this, going through this exercise is to say, what are you going to ask of your next superintendent? Does that make sense?
And to
What are you going to ask of your next superintendent?
piggyback on that, like, again, I just want to like get away from accepting the gap and like that it's our like role, because like I don't want to celebrate this and this and this. Like I will celebrate when this and this are up here.
Yeah.
Like
I can show you that.
not accepting,
Your current
which
status.
what is Tilia's point, actually not gap closing, but like the gap that's being closed really is this figurative gap that we expect of children of color. Because we're not actually closing the gap that is there. We're closing a gap in our heads of like where these kids should be and where we're getting them.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. I can show you, I've got some other slides. I can show you that. I can do it later if we have time. I can get the process, but so yes, this gap, as you just mentioned, still there. So the question that you're asking yourself is, what do we expect of our next superintendent? So that's grade 8 math. Again, pandemic didn't have a significant impact on that as it did the others. This is grade 4 math, and this is just African American students. But I wanted to show you just a perspective of, this is a perspective of what other cities look like, just so you can get a feel for what Cleveland looks like compared to some of the other cities that were on that early chart that I showed you around. Already, this is just African American students, but you'll see Cleveland, Baltimore, Detroit, Philadelphia, all about in the same place. But this is what the pandemic did in grade 4 math, just for African American students. Does that make sense? Just to say that Cleveland is not unique. I completely with you, Sarah. I don't accept it at all because I think it's the work that we've got to do to turn all of that around. But just to give you that perspective of what other districts are facing as well. So other districts are facing the same thing. By the way, other districts are facing some of the same challenges. So you see what Cleveland did over time. So I'm not showing you everything about Cleveland's data. This was a grade 4 math. Same thing. This is grade 4 math again, just for Black students. But this is Ohio, the national public, and large cities overall. So again, Cleveland is below everyone, but not going to be satisfied until that is completely eliminated. And that would be eliminating for Cleveland the differences between themselves and the rest of the nation. But you see the impact that the pandemic had. This is actually the state of Ohio, that green bar. So you see the state of Ohio and Cleveland are almost parallel. So that just gives you a picture. All right, with that, I'm gonna stop this Hispanic students. So you'll need to see everything, but that's what Hispanic students look like. Just so you'll know again, parallel to the state. So this is the state of Ohio, parallel to the state. So with that, do one additional slide, and then we'll get into why we're really here. But this slide is what just understanding the perspective of a superintendent. And one of the things that you're going to ask of your superintendent, the real challenge of being a superintendent, is to say, as a superintendent, what you really want is to know how well does the superintendent collaborate with or manage adults in service of improving student outcomes. What does that mean? Manage adults, collaborate with or manage adults in service to student outcomes. What we're really asking the superintendent to do is improve student outcomes. But what you're asking them to do is say, how well do you manage your central office staff? How well do you manage your teachers, the teachers union? How well do you work with or collaborate with? So collaborate with parents and committee members. How collaborating with school administrators, school board, the mayor's office, business community and foundations, state and local elected officials, local, state, and national media, community agencies, the police, children's services, et cetera. How well do you work with your own family? The one that I will add to the list, well, I didn't. The one that I would put at the very top of the list is how well do you work with Ray Hart and the Council of Great City Schools? Because obviously I'm biased. I think that would be top of the list. But what you're really saying is, how well does the superintendent juggle all of these adult pieces and parts? And how well they put those pieces and parts together in a way that improves outcomes for kids? And under that is thousands of adults. Does that make sense? But what you're asking them to do is collaborate with and manage adults in service of student outcomes. With that, I'm going to ask you to grab a Post-it note. I need everyone to grab a Post-it note and take the information that we just talked about. Take what you just shared. So what you just shared is here's where I think we need to go. Here's what my expectations are for the district. And what I'd like you to do is answer this question first. And what I want you to do is just take a moment and on different pieces of your Post-it note, not on the same Post-it note, on separate Post-it notes. What I'd like you to do is write down one on each Post-it note, but what are the 2 to 3 student outcome goals for the district that you would expect to see over the next 5 years? Now, before you start writing, again, write each of the 2 to 3 on a separate. So you should have at least 3 Post-it notes in front of you when you finish. I'm going to ask you, though, potentially to write 4 to get to 3. Here's why. I'm going to throw out some of your goals. And the reason I'm going to throw out some of them is I'm going to focus right now only on goals for students. If you give me a goal for an adult, I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to table it and say, nope, can't use that one. I only want students right now. What are the goals that you have for the next superintendent around student outcomes?
It has to be for the superintendent.
No, for the district. I say this, I'm sorry. Let me correct my language. This is goals for the district. What goals do you have for the district? And so goals for the district, goals for the superintendent, I consider synonymous, but these are what are the goals that you have for the district over the next 3 to 5 years as it relates to students?
So if kindergarten readiness, if kids are behind when they enter kindergarten, whose job is it to get them ready? Is that a district goal to
Do you have
get
a pre-K program?
some, but not everybody?
Okay.
Right, so all right, so that's a goal, okay, got it.
But yeah, absolutely. If you want to set that as a goal, then you're saying this is a goal that we have of improving kindergarten readiness. That is absolutely that's a student outcome measure.
Yes.
It is a district student outcome measure, and there are ways to accomplish that. And for those, Lisa and Louise, if you could type your responses into the chat, we'll take yours as well. But everyone write 2 to 3, and you should have them again on separate Post-it notes. I got it out, 9:30. Thank you. It's okay.
Yes.
As you're writing, feel free to take a break. You can take a break before, grab some water, come back and write, however you want to do it. So you can take a break, come back and write. We'll build a break as well.
Yeah, so restrooms are, if you go through the outside doors and then to the left. Yeah. No problem.
Just hang on, it's okay. Just hang on to them.
What to make some copy.
Bring it in with that.
Yes, sure.
Oh, okay.
Said he's gonna make some more. You got the last of what was in there.
That's good, thank you.
It's probably gonna be the strongest.
Yeah.
Let's check over.
All right. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna go through our process of consensus building. And I'm gonna start by asking you to share one and only one of the 3 or 4 that you wrote down. Pick the one that you like the best, but share one and only one. And I'm gonna go around the room and ask each person one at a time to share just one. And what I'll also do at the same time is ask you to share something that's similar, if you have it. All right, so I ask you to share something that's similar if you have it. So I will start to my left and ask you to share just one of what you have.
And this speaks to Sarah's point earlier. I've never been a closing the gap person either. But when I wrote down with gap elimination, so there shouldn't be any gaps. Matter of fact, we should outperform everybody else on that spectrum. So gap elimination.
For what? Gap elimination for the whole world?
Yeah, for everyone who is now performing below their peers.
Okay. All right, every grade and subject?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to pass me that Post-it note. Did anyone have something similar to gap closing?
I said essentially same, but also high state test scores and grade level readiness outcomes across all demographics.
All
So
demographic
like
groups?
I said, and I know I'm like getting fired up about the gap, but I think now's the time for us to get fired up about what we really want and make sure that the person we find can deliver that. And we've been, gap closing is important at first, but it's only a step.
Anyone else have something similar?
Yeah, I wrote down eliminate differences in achievement levels for Black and brown students versus white students.
Okay. Anyone else have something similar?
I have a question. State grades us on the gap. Okay, so it becomes an issue for the district because we're graded on it every year.
So I think there is a difference between what the word gap that we're talking about here in this context versus the gap that that the state uses. The state measure of gap closing is saying, where did students come in versus where they are today, right? So when you see the gap, if you will, the gap closing, we could still be closing the gap among Black students and among white students, but those lines may still be separate to what Leah was pointing out earlier, right? At least what I wrote down and what I heard Sarah say and what I hear you saying is those lines actually converging and going up at the same time, right? I mean, the fact that we have a distinctly separate line for white students that is higher appreciably over students that are Black and students that are Hispanic, that's the problem.
And it's remained so.
Right, they're basically straight lines.
Demographic, and
Right.
that's the part for me where it's like the fewer amount of students always are higher.
Yeah.
So
Any-
Ray, it's
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah.
I have a similar to what Robert said and what everybody else has been talking about, only I was much more specific. I went straight to grade 4. And I went to grade 4 reading and math, the gap. And I was specific by saying close the gap by 25%.
Okay, so I'll read hers, just so you all, because we don't have the chat up. So it says close the grade 4 math gap between white, Black, and Hispanic students by 25%. So she went strictly grade 4 math by 25%. Anyone else have something similar to gap closing?
Third grade literacy.
So you got one math, you got 3rd grade literacy, we
I
have
said kindergarten reading.
kindergarten. So, hold on,
Yeah.
let's do one at a time.
Sorry, Leah,
That's
sorry.
right. You got to pass it to me. Go ahead and read. You go ahead and read it.
Oh, no, I said improve 3rd grade literacy scores across all racial families.
And I said,
So I didn't put
3rd
a-
grade reading and math.
So it's a shift from gap closing. It's like a
Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah,
what-
better
Hang
scores.
for
on to
Yeah,
that.
that,
achievement.
yeah.
Hang on to that. Hang on to that. Anyone else have anything like gap closing?
Sorry, scared me away from it, so I'm not
So-
closing.
so I excuse you.
Yeah.
Yeah, do any gap. Sorry, I said like, yeah, I don't want to have any gap. I don't have any gap goals here. We go
Celebrate.
Let's ignore that. So give us then Denise one of yours.
Okay, well, I'm gonna piggyback off Leah because of what she and Angie said. So I said high focus on improving academic achievement in elementary grades, and I listed that as pre-K to 5.
Okay, so elementary grades, pre-K to 5, and how about to start off with achievement?
I said high focus on improving academic achievement. I can pass you this, so you'll have it.
Anyone else have something similar to improving academic achievement?
I said higher scores on third grade reading and math. Same thing.
If I may, I said improve academic, college, and career readiness for CMSD graduates.
Third graders, they're all.
I'm sorry, it's.
Well, I think it's, I think, I would say. Because that's elementary versus first, right?
I know, it looks neat when you get that.
Whoever came up with the idea to do them
It
backwards.
doesn't help us.
That's the worst idea ever. I hated they did that, but give me yours. Go ahead. You have two.
Buying similar posted.
Okay.
Holly, when we.
Third grade reading proficiency was what I wrote down.
And mine was improved third grade literacy.
So third grade reading, third grade literacy,
Third grade reading and math.
third grade reading and math, third grade literacy, third grade achievement.
Well, that's the,
Hey, you
kindergarten
guys,
reading is different.
consensus is easy with you guys, huh?
No, third grade reading is different from kindergarten reading is what I'm.
So the big talking about achievement. Yeah.
It is, no, well, you can, it's all right, it's all right. Didn't have to get it. So, yeah, closing with that.
Across all schools and demographics. Something that some of my lists talk about is disparities between schools. Because we accept a lot of, like, this is a good school, this, like, we accept John Hay as like, or it's not John Hay Science and Medicine or early college specifically, like, these are the schools where kids are gonna do well. And then there's all these schools where they don't, so.
Something
I
about
think talking
equity.
about schools and also.
So just give me one, we'll come back to it, hold on to the ones about schools. What is this one? This one is related to, so this is kindergarten reading proficiency across all demographics, okay?
Is that the same as kindergarten readiness? I don't know what they test. in kindergarten.
I thought it was reading. Oh, I don't.
It's, the crawl has some literacy sets of skills built into it, but it's how you would, it has some numeracy built into it, but it's how you would measure it. So it's one of the ways you can measure it. Okay, does that make sense? She said no.
I think we're gonna have to get more into like measurable goals later.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what we're trying to do. So I've got, this is all third grade literacy. I will keep this. Is it okay to keep kindergarten separate? Or you want me to put kindergarten with the achievement?
I feel like I have achievement. My other two, they're about high school graduation.
Yeah, and I have another thing about kindergarten readiness as well. I mean, I wrote down, well, I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I have a
But
kindergarten.
I think the kindergarten is separate from third grade reading.
And I think
So hold
PK
on
is
to,
separate.
so hold on to kindergarten for a second.
I too have a garden one and maybe.
Yeah, we'll come
maybe I
back.
do it. Okay.
Yep, we'll get there. Give me the next one that you want to share with the group.
I wanna achieve a 90% graduation rate across all students.
Okay, so 90% high school graduation rate. Anyone else have a high school graduation rate?
I didn't put a rate, just.
Secondary, I want 100% of those graduates to have a solidified college or career path.
Okay, so both related to high school graduates, what they can do.
With pace thing though.
So I wrote down increase college readiness for all students measured by need for remedial work in college.
Yeah, but aren't you measuring that after the fact? So are you measuring remedial
it is.
and then, yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
It is a tough one,
It's a measure.
but with say yes, we have those measures.
Yeah, and higher ed compound.
Right.
Yes, right.
Somebody else have something related to graduation?
I just. put improved graduation.
Improved graduation rate,
I had said that earlier.
college and career readiness?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that mine says the same thing. Make sure all students are graduate college or career ready.
Okay,
I have percent of students graduating with a college ready SAT score and percent of students graduating with an industry recognized credential.
okay,
Similarly, I again kind of focused on reducing the outcome disparities across schools with regard to this, but it's still like increased achievement across high schools, significantly reduced outcome disparities across high schools, including graduation, college readiness scores, and college going.
That's similar. And that's again, just for high school, like a high school measure.
Yes.
That's a district. You go ahead, you pass that up. You had something similar?
So to the school part.
Just
I'll
read
wait.
Wait.
I have equitable access to classes and programs to all students across the city. Not with open enrollment opportunity, but making sure that.
In each individual school?
Yes.
That may get
But making sure that, like, to Sarah's point, that, we weren't just looking at one school at the John Day as being the school, and every other, high school kind of being, not,
Gotcha.
a good high school for, students to attend.
So it's making sure that students have access to the same courses, same coursework,
Yes.
same quality of coursework. across
And I know,
access.
right,
Hang on to that one, because I think that's a,
Back over to the portfolio strategy.
No,
Like every,
the portfolio strategy should mean that, well, a few
go
different
ahead,
things.
pass it to them.
But that they're, like, this is the way I explained it to a parent who's upset about this, rightfully so. But like the idea between having like a science and medicine school and a digital arts school and this and that, like, these are learning themes through which you should be able to have all of the same learning opportunities in terms of what you're getting, in terms of quality and core academic knowledge, but you're learning it through a different lens. And that's like the idea that I think of as the portfolio model, but that's not what I see in practice. What I see in practice is that these are different levels of quality and opportunity for kids.
agreed, and so to piggyback off that, just because a student goes to, the ed school where, they receive all the best teachers or all the best courses, geek courses and everything, doesn't mean that, they walk away with all the algebra and ELA and everything knowledge, and because they go to Lincoln West, now they're and are now going to OSU. I was talking to my college now mentee, and who's now sitting in a remedial course, trying to figure out like how to do very basic math that she should have been learning with us. And she didn't walk away from with in our schools. And so that's basic knowledge that should have been walked away from with in any school.
Yeah, we
Okay,
should
Robert.
have high schools that are that are solidifying economic or other types of stratification. We should have high schools that are delivering access and opportunity across the board in this thing.
Okay. You have one.
Before we move off achievement, I just, percent of students proficient in 8th grade math, because that's one of the handful of measures that's actually an indicator of economic mobility in education.
So you want them to go back into.
I would put it in
one?
achievement.
Okay. Okay. And you have another one?
Nope.
You're all tapped out?
Well, I could make more, but having followed the directions.
That's good. No, you only get three. You only get three. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, this is separate.
Yeah. So
It's your
turn.
Oh.
It's your turn. Something completely.
So one that I have not fully thought out. I do not have good data on that I can think of, but I wanted to make sure it was mentioned, was supports for students with disabilities and English language learners.
Okay.
And just think about what our goals are for those groups as well.
So did anyone have something similar for student groups?
I have something regarding sports too.
And I
So,
want to mention that those are two very different groups.
Absolutely.
I just wrote improve student sports to include mental health. Mental health counselors in every school, and improve transportation by ending the RTA relationship. Reading the I know those were very specific, like, measures, but I know that, reading student safety and talking about, the at-risk student, performance, or just looking at your at-risk students performing low and then just, any demographic and any, anything like that. These students that we have to, provide for in that, in either any context, they're going to need, these mental, like at the school, we've been seeing, we get those emails, with unfortunate circumstances that happen with students, and, we can't just be, dealing with the after effects, hopefully. We're taking more proactive measures, and at the same time, when like the students can't take care, worry about education, and student achievement, if they're having to worry about safety and their own mental health.
So,
Trauma.
Right.
yeah, so I'm gonna take this one because I think this is a little different than the support for students with disabilities. So I'm gonna hold on to this one for a second. Did anyone have anything else related to specific student achievement around identifying specific student populations?
One related to Cleveland, maybe I'll throw this out because it's a dumb goal. So I read it now. Just expand pre-K to younger students and recruit more students to attend. So it's pre-K achievement.
I have a pre-K. Got a lot of pre-K.
Yeah, out of order, but that's all right.
Oh, sorry.
We'll take pre-K. I will,
Trying to keep a little.
yeah,
Nice and high
we'll
quality.
keep that one, hang on to the pre-K. I'll go to
Full
that.
day, yeah.
Did anyone have anything related to mental health services or mental health supports?
So this isn't, I think it's related, but I wrote down happy students in all district schools. So it is related to mental health. I didn't write down mental health, but that's what I meant, right? I said happy students and.
So that got yours. You want to give me another
No,
one? So I combine that one?
To this pre-K.
Oh, you got pre-K?
Yeah.
All right, then we can do pre-K for everybody.
Um,
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read yours.
full day pre-K, all schools high quality from.
High quality pre-K for all, more kids attending. High quality pre-K,
Expand pre-K to younger students and recruit more students to attend.
expand pre-K, universal
What
pre-K.
grade? What grade is pre-K now? 34.
Years and soon.
Yeah.
Say again?
It's 3 and 4 year olds.
That's what I thought, so.
That's the
Pre-K.
pre for Cleveland.
That's the, yeah, and it was pre-Berkeley data that made me go.
Pre-K.
So I'm cheating here because I'm looking at the last poster that Anne has. It says higher kindergarten readiness. I wrote down engaging all children in pre-4 plea measured by kindergarten readiness, right? So it goes, so all the things that you've read so far is about getting more students into pre-K.
Quality.
I'm trying to stay away from the word quality because that's a subjective term, right? I use the word engagement because again, when you're talking about 3rd and 4th grade kids, we need to get them actually excited about learning, which is different than 3 and 4 year olds.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's in 3rd and 4th grade.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant 3 and 4 year olds. Thank you. I meant 3 and 4 year olds, getting them, thank you, and getting them excited about learning. And so that's why I use the word engagement. And then I put in measured by kindergarten readiness. So I don't know if you want to keep them separate.
We'll keep them together. We'll do
Okay.
how we do it. We keep them together. Did you have?
I just said higher kindergarten readiness.
And then Lisa also had increased number of students enrolled in pre-4 plea by 50%.
In
Well, they're not really involved.
Pre-4.
in-
Yeah. I think we're using pre-4 plea as a proxy for
Yeah.
PK.
Yeah, 'cause there was some in that transformation alliance report. I think that I think at the last meeting, there was something like 10 or 11,000 kids, 3 and 4 year old kids. And only like a third of them are enrolled in a high quality, however they measure that high quality preschool. Across Yeah.
For step up
So
to
big
quality,
gap.
the craziest part is that most CMSD schools that have a preschool program are 5-star on our step up to quality. But that's where perception comes in, because if you have 3 children, different grades or ages, the school that's the bad school may have a 5-star preschool program, but because it's labeled by whomever, wherever as a bad school, they don't consider it, even though the home center may only have 3 stars, but it's perceived as safe and good, and
Yes.
or even a suburban center. I've seen people that will not, my child went to the Stonebrook preschool program, they thought I was crazy, but they were going to Cleveland Heights.
Yep.
And it wasn't ranked as high.
No,
All because and so that to me is, I don't know, I don't have enough posters to figure out perception.
And I don't know,
Even when we have the scores, in the rating, we don't get the look.
You don't get the trust.
Yeah.
when I don't know if we even have enough high quality seats for the kids who are eligible to go. And I don't mean we, the district, I mean we across the city. And there's more than just getting 3 and 4-year-olds engaged. This is also an adult issue too.
Well, remember I
Yeah.
said
So-
the superintendent has to.
Yes,
manage
exactly, has to
all
do
of
with
those.
right, exactly right. So there is. Yeah.
So did you you have any others to add?
No, that was all for us.
Do you have any others to add? Lisa, did you have any others to add?
No, I
Denise
think
has-
you got all of mine.
Got
I
all
think you got
yours?
all of mine. Yeah.
Louise, did you have anything that you wanted to add or share? Good, okay, thank you. Do you have any others?
I have one that, and I don't know if this is an adult issue, kid issue, or superintendent issue, but all of attendance really crosses all of it, because in order to do all of that, you need to get butts in the seats.
Right.
Okay, so attendance.
Certainly by the
Is
time.
that a commercial? Seats.
Did anyone else have something so related to attendance?
I'm.
You can't add,
included it.
you can't add another.
I know, but as part of my happy students, right? I mean, happy students means, let me just explain that, right? Happy students means that students want to go to school. They are excited when they're in school. They feel challenged. They feel like they're actually learning, and therefore they attend school. And there's mental health support, all of that stuff. So that's what I encapsulated in that word happy. So just
And a
added
happy
here.
student encourages the parent to get.
Correct.
Yeah, and actually, I just want to share that yesterday at the, this week at the, Mayor Bid, CO Gordon listening event with student. A student actually mentioned that she did not attend school because of a number of factors that made it a bad place for her. So happiness and attendance, engagement are for sure, and safety in
Yeah.
the student's case are all.
I spent a few minutes at the America's Course event last night. There were like 200 plus CMSD students from about 14 different schools there. And those students were all happy, right? I mean, they were happy to be there. They were excited. They were doing a poetry slam, but it was really visible and perceptible that those kids were happy. So that just needs to be more of that.
All right, did you have another?
Improve science education for all students, especially 6 to 12.
Science education, is that achievement? Or is it separate from
Is
achievement?
that instruction? or
It could be
curriculum?
achievement, yeah, I mean, it's just a very specific, I think especially in middle school, we don't really have science education.
Okay. I'll put it next to achievement, how about that? I'll let it
Wherever
touch.
you'd like to place
Yeah,
it.
I'll let it touch achievement, now we'll keep it separate. Did you have another?
No, I'm on.
All out? Anyone else?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm not even looking at reading, and I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep that at home.
What is it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there, I said, well, I don't, maybe you guys don't need to, that's the. Citywide, I proposed a year-round schools district-wide.
You're not wrong.
Not wrong, but that's.
Could be
honestly-
the attendance kind of.
But you don't have that in the century, rare.
Yes, wait, you don't go out to the field and,
I've got a question. I've got a question later. But don't forget back to school. My next question is that I would like to. But it ain't. I'm still giving it back to you because it's gonna be students. To another question I have. The parents. All right. So let's summarize really quickly.
Well.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna push back a little bit. We've done the summer learning experience where we've had the opportunity to engage back with students during during those 6 weeks and have been able to do some remedial work for those students and even for students who are not, struggling with work, been able to still engage with them. And it's proven to help catch them up with whatever test or whatever, get them back on grade level with whatever they've been missing out. And so I know that with the summer learning experience, we only have so much money to make it last an X amount of years. And so when I was thinking about the year-round schools, I was thinking about having, not the 2 months off, but having that time period be a time where students would still be able to catch up with whatever work.
So if you want to capture that as a student outcome, I would say reduce the summer merit, if you will, right? I mean, that's the student outcome, right? What you're talking about is the tactic that you would use to address that. But the student outcome is when a kid goes from 5th grade to 6th grade, that they didn't forget half the things that they learned in 6th grade. That's what you really want, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you would, we can take that. We can take.
So it's reduced learning loss. That's sort of the broad outcome. It's reduced learning loss.
I think it's also a safety.
Yeah.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
So.
I think in general,
And I mean, in general, like they get food, they get it's safe,
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read all of these. And now as a team, as I read through these, as a team, you've all picked the individual goals that you want for the district. But now as a board, you get 5, 3 to 5. So you can pick 3 to 5. So I got that reduced. Okay. And actually, I'm going to put that over here close because there's also a gap. I'm going to put it close to the gap closing. But it's a little different. So I'll keep it separate. So as a team, now you get 5. So you can have 3 to 5 overall goals. Here's where we're going. But you've got to reach consensus on just 3 to 5.
Why does it just need to be 3 to 5?
Here's why it needs to be 3 to 5, and I'll tell you. We'll get to why how we do things, and I'll start to explain more. A couple of things that we do when we go through and work with boards. Normally, it's a long process. I'm taking you through a truncated process. Normally, we go through a long, several day process of working with you to get through what we call goals and guardrails. All right, goals. We focus on first of all student outcome goals. And those student outcome goals are things that students know or are able to do. So it's got to be something that a student can demonstrate that they know or are able to do. That's the student goal. Guardrail. And some of what you just shared, I've collected them all, but some of what you just shared are actually guardrails. Guardrails are the values of the community. So it's what you as a board say, this is what we value as a community, and this is what the superintendent has to stay within. Now, we have those guardrails listed as thou shalt nots. So in other words, and I'll use your example about happy kids as an example. Essentially, I can have a goal that kids are happy. And a goal that kids are happy means that students have to know or be able to do happiness. Are you with me? That's not necessarily something that a kid knows or is able to do. So I may say, okay, I'm not going to make that a goal. But what I will do is make a guardrail that says that we want the student, thou shalt not operate schools where students don't have a high student satisfaction level with the building. And it's written as a thou shalt not for this reason. It's written as you can accomplish these goals that we set for you in any way that you like, as long as you maintain this value, as long as you don't go outside of this value. Does that make sense? We give you another example. I give you lots of examples.
I need to translate it into language that I.
So I will translate it for you, but I'm going to take now and say your goals as a group, as an organization, your goals are really to say, here's what we want students to be able to do. And then here's what we want the superintendent to operate within. Those guardrails also have goals. Can I measure student satisfaction? Can I measure student happiness in school? Can I measure student happiness in school?
Probably, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I can measure student happiness in school. I can absolutely measure it. It can be a quantitative measure of whether or not the superintendent is maintaining happiness in school. But happiness is not a measure of what a student knows or is able to do. Does that make sense? And we'll separate those out as you go. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to ask you to pick 3 to 5, and here's why. Research shows, and I can show you tons and tons of research. Research shows that if I set more than 3 to 5 goals, what happens?
Don't get done.
Why not?
You're not focused.
Because I'm not focused. If I go over 5 goals, you're asking me to do way too much and nothing's going to get accomplished. So there's research that shows that anything beyond 3 to 5 goals, there's actually what's called diminishing marginal returns, economic term.
That term
That term you understand.
Yeah.
So there's a diminishing marginal returns. The higher you go with the number of goals, the less that gets accomplished, because you're asking me to go in too many different directions. So when your superintendent comes in, your superintendent is going to ask you, or the potential superintendent is going to ask you, what is it you want me to accomplish? And you want to be able to say, here's the 3 to 5 things that we want you to accomplish. This is what we want students to know or be able to do when they're in our district. Beyond that, there are some things that we want you to live within. In other words, we want students to be happy in school. We want students to have other things. And I'll get to those in a minute, because that's actually the next question. But essentially, those are what we'll start to create. And in that way, what you've done is you've now galvanized as a board around, here's the 3 to 5 goals, and then here's the things that we want you to live within. You can choose as a board to have more than 5, but if you add more than 5 and you send the superintendent doing lots of different things, none of them are going to get accomplished.
Yeah.
Questions about that?
So I have an addition and a question.
Go ahead.
One, I appreciate you for explaining the 3 to 5 goals. I think as a job candidate too, like if I'm coming in, it's like, you gotta achieve these 10, 15, 20 things in 5 years or whatever. I'm gonna be like, hold on, never mind. So I think you're right. I appreciate that. Question about like the process. And I think that we've all brought up goals that, like, everything I heard, I think was important. A lot of things I heard, I think are coming from our own like priorities, right? And our own exposures to things. And also like even things that I said, as well as I don't have full data on or information about like how I would truly set a goal around it. So how are we gonna work through all of these post-its and kind of set up goals that are valid, for lack of a better word, and then choose from there?
Perfect. Once we go through the process, and we're going to take you, have a conversation now about what those goals actually are. You don't have to have the numbers right now. You don't have to know what the numbers are. You don't have to know what the exact numbers are. We'll lay out a goal for each of the goals once you've established them. All right, here's how we want to measure it. We want to go from here to here by 20. This is 2022. But do you have goals in a strategic plan? I can tell by
Eric.
There goes in Eric's contract.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially what you're saying is, all right, new superintendent, by this is 2022, by 2027, 2026, 2025, however you want to do it, we want you to go from here to here by that time frame. And we're going to measure each year, maybe twice a year, benchmarks or what have you, but we're going to measure each year whether or not we're making progress toward that goal. Does that make sense? And so essentially you can establish here's the goal, here's where we're going. But again, letting you know, you don't have to have the numbers now. Once we establish what it is, we'll go back and get the numbers and fill it.
So are we choosing, sorry, are we choosing from themes of goals right now, and then we'll kind of?
Methods of measurement. I think that's my question. Are we looking at a focus area, or are we trying to also agree on a method of measurement right now?
Well, measurement, no. So you don't have to worry about how you're gonna measure it. Right now, it's just, where is it that we want to go? What is it we want to see? And then we'll narrow down to measurement and everything else.
Yeah, Ray,
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
yeah, could I, before you move to narrow some of these goals, could I ask, just as a summary matter, the board to jump back up to a level higher to your overall vision? And you have the benefit of knowing what it is the school district has done over the last 10 or 15 years that's gotten you the gains that you have gotten. And you have made substantial improvement in the school district over the years. I guess the question I would ask is, as you are articulating these various goals, one could say the truth of the matter is that you've made some progress on a number of the goals that you've named over the years. Are you as a board saying that the trajectory we are on to beat the goals that you are starting to outline is sufficient, and we should stay with the game plan that we have? Or are you saying we need to pick up the pace? Or are you saying we need to focus on some different areas than we've focused on before? All three of those are kind of above the level of goals and more to the level of vision. Are you asking for a steady as you go vision of the future? Are you saying that we need to accelerate or pick up the pace? Are you saying we're doing fine in the following areas, but we need to bear down on these new ones? So what is before Ray kind of narrows the goals, what's the answer to this question about whether or not you think the trajectory of improvement that you're on is what you want your next superintendent to pursue, or are you asking for something different here? Is that question clear?
Yes, and
Clear and overall.
It's probably a harder question, but
it is. Well, it's, and the answer is yes and yes. Had Eric stayed here, we would be, I believe, satisfied with the trajectory of the district that we were going in prior to pandemic. Because we were moving a lot of things in the right direction. And there's always been a conversation about how fast. And I think we all agree that not fast enough. So as we look at a new CEO, in my mind, I would like to see the trajectory continue and continue faster and better. So that's why I said yes and yes. I don't know which is the right answer, if there is a right answer, but in my mind, that's kind of what I'd like. And that speaks more to vision than to goals. So what goals do we institute to back up that vision.
Yeah, the right answer here, Robert, is the one that you all agree on. So does everybody generally agree with Robert's articulation of your direction?
So Mike, answering maybe back more towards your question, I mean, I agree with what Robert's saying. I think we're probably at acceleration and something different. So like not the number one thing you said, but maybe a blend of 2 and 3. But I don't, that's like, we definitely want to accelerate, and we probably want to accelerate in like maybe a little different ways.
So if I can just offer I don't think it's a counterpoint, because I agree largely with what Robert you just said, right? But I think if I can add one thing to that, is to go back to that one chart or couple charts that Ray showed us with those lines, right? Yes, we're happy with the trajectory, as in those lines are all pointing upward to the right, except for the pandemic. Let's leave that for a second, right? But I think that there is dissatisfaction that there are in fact 3 lines that are parallel lines, right? The line for white students, line for Hispanic students, and line for Black students. So the way in which I would want the trajectory to change with new leadership is that those lines start to need to converge and be pointed up at the same time, because there's 2 ways of achieving convergence, right? We could just get the top line to go down, and then we could consider that we don't want that, right? So I want to be clearer and voice that what we want is for those lines to keep pointing up and for those lines to converge.
Which would involve acceleration of the lower lines to catch and exceed.
Correct.
Because the top line is gonna keep going too.
That's correct.
Gonna be harder to catch.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like most everybody is in general agreement. I mean, is there anybody who's has a thought that is different from what is being voiced so far? It sounds like Sarah, your original points are pretty much in line with what has been articulated here. Same with you, Denise, and others. And this is taking absolutely nothing away from the great work that your superintendent and the district and the board has done over the years to get the school district to where it is right now. You've made enormous progress. It's a vastly better school system than it was some years ago. This is a question about your direction and overall aspirations for the system in the future. And it sounds like keep up the good work, but let's pick up the pace kind of answer, which is a perfectly good answer.
So we've got one more response. Mike.
Question. So when you showed us the data disaggregated by race, and we had white students outperforming other students, that showed us 3 different superintendents from 2003 to 2022. So I am in agreement with continue the upward progress, but accelerate. But I'm also scared about the okay, never mind, because we're going to be asking candidates to take on this position after a pandemic, but also do something that the last 3 hires, like this is not specific to Eric, right? Like we saw different leadership regimes. So how do we temper our expectations where, it's not, we're not sitting on our hands, we want the seats in the butts in the seats. But we do want some acceleration, but at a fair pace for a new hire.
So you can set that so when you set the goals that are achievable. So SMART goals, if you're familiar with SMART goals, we'll work with you on setting SMART goals in the process. But you set the goals so that and built into the SMART goal process, there's 2 goals that actually work against each other. So if you're familiar with SMART goals, achievable is one of the aspects of a SMART, but the other aspect of a SMART goal is reachable. Does that make sense? So you got to set a goal that is both challenging the superintendent, but at the same time, reachable for the superintendent. Those 2 work against each other. We'll work with you on that process. We'll turn these into SMART goals once you get the general.
Okay,
design.
Ray, the auxiliary question here is after you narrow your goals down and you get into things like levers, you should start asking yourself, what is it that you're going to be asking your next superintendent to do that in fact would pick up the pace? It wouldn't just take the current trajectory that you have. Is there something that you as a board, and you don't have to answer this question with a great deal of specificity, but are there things that you want the next superintendent to do that you think would pick up the pace in ways that you haven't done as a system so far? Also a tough answer to question, a tough question to answer because it means spending a little time with the levers inside of the Cleveland plan to know what's gotten you to where you are right now and what it is you need to do in addition to that to get you the gains that you're asking for. Anyway, Ray, I will stop interfering and turn it back to you.
No interference at all.
Vision and what Leah said about, you know, a candidate and what they would be willing to do, ready to do, able to do. I still think it's important to think of our long-term vision. Like if I say, I don't want the district to be better, I want the district to be great. That can mean, you know, arbitrary number in 10 years, but then the goals that we set within 5 years are goals that lead to that. So that person is not daunted by like, you new person have to bring us up to great. It is, you have to bring us up to these goals that will get us on, continue us on a trajectory to great, or ensure that we are on a trajectory to great. So I don't want to set that aside as a long-term goal of greatness as opposed to improvement. But recognize that like that's still an attainable, it has to be attainable at some point, right? Like otherwise, what the heck is going on? We just have to identify the goals that for now will eventually lead to that greatness in a reasonable period of time.
What was Dr. Sanders' vision statement?
Making, our goal is to make the Cleveland Metropolitan School District a premier school district in the United States.
That was his vision.
Premier.
And so you said. So you set goals around that vision statement.
It was already there.
Like you said, because you know, it would be unfair to bring somebody in here and say in 5 years, X, Y, and Z. But I think it's fair to bring someone in here and say, here's our vision. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and we expect steady and rapid progress towards that vision. You know, so if you hire somebody and they understand what the vision is, understand what their goals are, and in 2 or 3 years down the road, we're not going anywhere, then we're back at this table again, looking for another CEO.
All right.
I mean, I don't know, I didn't put it in a post-it because it wasn't a student goal, but like, I want CMSD to be the best, right? Like the greatest, the best, whatever that is for Cleveland children. Because one thing that I really struggle with is a John Hay Science and Medicine, a School of the Arts, a Cambridge International, and the out-of-district students that are there, and these lottery seats, this admissions process and a BARD, right? And I struggle with that. I understand the concept of an open enrollment district. I understand that we have the space, but some of these children in some of these high performing schools are not even residents. And so how do we make it the best district? If I have a child from Glenville that wants to be a ballerina, how do I make sure she's actually in School of the Arts with the child that had 8 years worth of private training from Shaker that wants to train at School of the Arts as well? That worries me. I mean, it really, really does. So I don't know where it fits in our posted. I see you have a method to the madness of it.
I do, but yes, you'll be able to work those things as you go, but the first thing I'll start with,
What I hear in that is a guardrail in some ways, right? It's actually a value around, we want Cleveland residents to have access to the school of their choice.
Yeah.
Ahead of the broader open enrollment process that exists for the district. Or outside of the city boundary.
Because I guess for me, it was personal because if I take my son as an example, you had this whole class of families who they benefited from the high quality preschool program they were all in. And then 7 of the 15 of them left to go to their kindergarten class in Shaker. Right? So they sucked up our seats.
Right.
They got the high performing, the high quality curriculum. But my baby can't go with them to Shaker, right? You know, so what, not that we need to change that the opportunity is there for all students in our region, but how do we make sure that
there's a priority for
and you know, I'm asking about it, and school is like, oh yeah, we see this drop every year. Like this is what they expect in their numbers.
But I think part of it is the priority, which I don't know what we can do under state law. I would like to learn more, but like, yes, there should be a priority for Cleveland residents, but and also it should not be that you need to go to this specific school to get a quality pre-K experience. That should be available, and it should be
across the
quality
district,
every school.
across the city.
And I say, like, it shouldn't be that you have to figure out as a parent which one is going to have that. Like, it should be that it's there across the board at some point in the future. And you know, I don't know if I've said this before, but like growing up, my family was low income. My parents were highly educated, but very low income. And I always went to public schools. I went to Chicago public schools in the 90s, if you know what those schools were like at that time. And my parents like worked so hard to try to figure out what the best public school was going to be, and like how could they try to live in that neighborhood with very limited information. And like families, like I said, my parents were highly educated, so they had some access to figuring that out, but like families don't all have that. They shouldn't all have that, and it shouldn't be like a process and a challenge of figuring out how to get that. If you're in the Cleveland Public School District, you live in it, like you should be able to count on that.
So let's go ahead and start this process. So we got it. Let's start this process of just kind of narrowing this down. I'm gonna have you talk about 2 different things. But leading into the process, I want to answer one final question about, because Ann asked earlier, why just 5 goals? Why not 10, 11, 12? Why just 5? Yep, but there's one other issue related to that, to why just 5 goals that we haven't addressed, but we'll need to, or why you need to reach consensus. How many bosses does the CEO have?
What? It's a very dangerous question.
It's not a dangerous question.
Every event thinks
How many bosses does the CEO have?
should have one.
It should not be
Which is the
9,
board.
it may be 1 or 2,
Who is-
but as a board, it should be 1.
So the answer is how many bosses does it, or the question is, how many bosses does the CEO have?
Does or should?
How many bosses does the CEO have? How many bosses?
36,000.
36,000?
Yeah, the number of kids in the schools.
How many bosses does the CEO have? What's the one?
Should be us.
It's beyond just, it's us, but what's the one? What's the one boss? Are there 36,000? Are there 250,000? Are there 9? Or is there 1? What's the one?
The board.
The board. The one is the board. CEO has 1 boss. It's the board. What that means, though, is that as a board, the 9 of you have to come together and set one set of goals that speaks for all 9 of you. Because the CEO can't respond to 9 different directives. I can't have 9 different people telling me to go in 9 different directions, because what have I just done? I've just done what?
Diminishing marginal return.
I've just done diminishing marginal returns. And what I've done is I said, if all 9 of us have 5 goals, then the CEO has 45 different things they've got to accomplish. What's gonna happen?
None of it gets done.
None of it's gonna get done. None of it's gonna get done. The greatest challenge of our boards across the country, the greatest challenge is speaking as one. But that is the process that you now have to do. The process that you have to do is say, we have to speak as one, not as 9 times 5 or 36,000 times 5. Is everybody with me? So there's 2 reasons why you want just 5 goals. 1 is because of diminishing marginal returns, but 2 is because the board has to speak as a. Does that make sense? You ready to have fun? I told you to be fun. I said we were coming to a party. All right. So let's start with narrowing these down. So you've got, I'm going to give you the big ticket items that I see based on what you shared. So what we've done is we've kind of lumped some of these together. I'm going to give you the big ticket items of what's here. So the very first thing you shared with me was gap closing. Now there's various ways to do the gap closing, but the first thing you shared was gap closing. So with gap closing, we talked about that's college and career. There's a gap closing. Sorry. With gap closing, we talked about gap elimination. We talked about eliminating differences for Black and brown students. And then we talked about state test scores, grade level readiness scores across demographics. So that's gap closing. The second one that I heard was improving academic achievement. The improving academic achievement was percentage of students proficient in 8th grade, 3rd grade literacy, higher scores on 3rd grade reading and math, high focus on improving academic achievement in elementary grades, pre-K through 5. There's another 3rd grade achievement. There is 3rd grade reading proficiency, and then there's improved 3rd grade literacy scores across all racial and ethnic groups. So there's a lot of 3rd grade and 8th grade, and science is kind of touching that. So science 612 was kind of touching that gap, that improving achievement. Graduation rate. Now the graduation rate is a little unique. So I'm just going through my list of what you gave me. But with graduation rate, there's actually 2 things that you described when you talked about graduation rate, and they're different. One is the graduation rate itself, which is counting the number of kids who graduate. Is everyone with me? The second is you talked about graduating, but by being able to not have remedial courses in post-secondary, or you talked about graduating with equal quality across school districts. You talked about practicing, right now you've got a different level of quality for kids based on the school they attend. So there's 2 different things going on there. There is whether or not you want to change the rate, which is one measure, but there's also whether or not you want to change the quality of the graduate or address the quality of a graduate in a goal. Does that make sense? Those aren't the same things. One is the quality of a graduate. The other is how many graduates we have. 2 different things. Pre-K. Pre-K is the same but dynamic. So the next big issue that you had was pre-K. With pre-K, there is enrollment, increasing the number of seats, but there's also quality. Quality, for example, would be kindergarten readiness. I want kindergarten readiness to be at X, move from X to Y. If I move kindergarten readiness, I'm changing the what of my pre-K.
Quality.
I'm changing the quality. I'm changing the quality of my pre-K. So I can add pre-K seats, or I can focus on the quality of the seats that I currently have. 2 separate goals.
I don't know if there aren't enough seats. Now, maybe somebody else knows. Are we adding seats or are we adding butts in seats? Because maybe the seats are there and there are not enough butts in them. That I don't know.
Yes, so the dynamic, to my understanding, there are more children than seats, and there are more seats than children enrolled. So we actually have both problems.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's especially increased since the pandemic. Like, I know my stats a little bit more before the pandemic, and we certainly at that. And again, and it's also weird because the goal is not 100%. Like, you have 10,000 kids, the goal, I mean, in our heads, it would be 100% of them would be in them, but it's actually like 70% or so, some things, I don't even guess it, yeah, whatever, but it, yes, it's both.
So there's three different things, so that's three different goals. So one goal is the quality of pre-K, one goal is the number of butts in seats, and the third might be the number of seats. Is that what I'm hearing?
And I would say there's a fourth one, which is you don't, that those could be considered ways to solve the problem of kindergarten readiness. So if you set a goal around kindergarten readiness, another way to go about that goal is to think about like what resources and support are we putting in the birth to pre-K space, and
which may be more of a city goal than a school district.
Yeah.
Right. So multiple ways to look at it, but yes. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'll go through a couple other questions for you. We're not going to answer, but I'll go through them.
I was
So-
not suggesting CMSD should to
That's
page
right.
3 for the record, but yes.
So pre-K is another. I'm going to give you some of the others. So those are the biggest. So the biggest were those: gap closing, improving achievement, graduation rate versus graduation quality, pre-K rate versus pre-K quality, and everything that goes with that. Some of the others are reducing summer learning loss, attendance, improving supports to students around mental health, increased supports for students with disabilities and English language learners, and then improving science we kind of talked about. So
Do we ever talk about money though? Like,
is that something that a student will know or be able to do?
no, but if you set goals that you can't pay for, then what was the point of setting the goal?
It's not a matter of you're setting the goal and you're gonna challenge the superintendent to make it happen. Your job is to set the goal.
Is money a guardrail? Is it beyond?
Yeah, that's a better
It,
question.
it would be a guardrail if you needed to. So yes, you can set a guardrail around fiscal
Responsibility.
fiscal responsibility.
All right, that's
So you can set a guardrail around that. I can tell you that, there's some guardrails that you can say, if you're not fiscally responsible, the state and the FBI are gonna come after you. So I don't really need to worry about setting that as a goal. Does that make sense? Or as a guardrail? So there's some cases you can say, it's like saying one of our guardrails is obey the law. And you don't need to really set a guardrail around obey the law, because if they don't, they're gonna.
Well, but going back to the economics lesson, there's all needs and wants are almost always greater than resources available. So to me, it's a resource question.
That's what you're gonna ask that's why all those adults who are on that list, because what you're gonna ask the superintendent to do is, these are the goals we want you to accomplish. Work with all those adults to figure out how you make it happen.
Yeah, Holly brought up something earlier that I think is important to remember is vision versus strategy. Goals versus
Okay.
I'm
strategy.
gonna talk about that. That's one of the questions I have in the PowerPoint. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint in a minute. So those are the big ticket items. Now, let's take the achievement one first. I'm gonna jump around. Do you, as a collective, do you feel it's comfortable to set an achievement goal for the district? For the district? Do you feel
One goal
comfortable?
or multiple achievement goals?
You got five total to work with. You got 5, you can go up to 5. So we got one yes.
And I think when you start talking, and this speaks to your data question, when you start developing those kind of goals, you're gonna need to drop some data.
We'll do that. We'll go back and do that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Once you say, this is where we want to focus, we'll go back and drop some data in there.
Okay.
Are you just asking, do we feel comfortable, like, say, we want students to achieve in CMSD?
Having a goal around achievement.
If that's.
And I'm gonna get to where in a minute. I'll make it easy for you. Where I'm going next is, okay, if you want an achievement goal, several of you said 3rd grade achievement. Others added 8th and something else. But essentially, you have pretty much defined here that if you can all agree 3rd grade achievement, and you can have others, but you pretty much, most of you have said 3rd grade achievement. And are you comfortable with that?
Can one of our goals be as specific to literacy? I mean, the thing that
Absolutely.
I worry about many community issues, but one of them is the generational illiteracy that we have. And some makers include we're up to 80% of adult illiteracy. So we're asking parents to read brochures about school choice for their child based on the data is already struggling with literacy at 9 years old.
These are your goals.
So.
And in addition to that, I will tell you that some of our districts, because their data pointed in this direction, some of our districts have said, you know what, one of our goals is African-American males and their student achievement and literacy. Why? Because that was the group of students that in their district was clearly the most marginalized group of students. So they went as specific to say, our goal is to improve student achievement specifically for African-American males and literacy. So these are your goals. But yes, you can't. The answer to that is yes. I don't think in your case, we're talking about what you need, but anyone have thoughts around what an achievement goal should look like? I'll give you this.
So I'm sitting here hesitating and thinking, I do want to articulate and quantify the convergence of those lines, right? I mean, I don't have the words yet, but we can get there, right? But that's the point, right? And what you just said, the example you just said of African-American males doing better already gets to some of that, right? Because that is talking about that one line, going up and converging with the higher line. But that elimination of achievement levels by different demographic groups, while still increasing the overall achievement level of the district.
So that's two different things.
Yeah.
There's two different things.
See,
So-
look,
But it
the
has to
gap,
be-
so there's the
Yeah.
related to gap closing and related to.
Yes,
achievement.
that's
Correct.
a gap closure.
Yeah.
So we comfortable. So we got two goals.
Yeah.
But I thought we said our gap closing in this conversation is different than
Yeah.
measured.
So we were talking about achievement.
You
No,
could,
no, no. I mean, we're talking about achievement.
so it's different than the way the state measures it, but you all could define, I mean, Ray can help you set up a measurement system that aligns to what you. that you're doing.
But the measurement, we have to be able to measure what it is.
We can work on the measurement later, and you don't have to have the state's measure.
Right, I'm just saying the language.
But I think,
Yeah.
sorry.
You can clarify the language. You can clarify the language in the goal, because you're gonna be specific about, here's how we're gonna measure this, which will, that language and how you measure it will be different from the
I'm
state.
sorry, I do comms. So when we said that that term had two different meanings, I was like, we gotta start
Define what
calling
it
it something
means.
else.
Correct, that's right. And I think I agree with you. I think we do need to come up with a different term. I don't think we should use gap closing, because gap closing has a meaning that
Yes.
645 other
Yeah.
districts in the school, in the state have, and the state has, right? If we want to,
Racially equitable outcomes for students.
something like that, right? I mean, and that's, we have to come up with some term for that. And in addition to that, I think it is useful for us as a group, in conjunction with whoever comes in as the new leader, to have a very clear articulation of how this measure that we think is important matches up with the measures that the state thinks are important. Because, I'm saying that as, even before my time on the board, right? I mean, there was always, and as a parent, there was always this explanation phase, if you will, right? I mean, as soon as the state report card comes out, there is that, there's the next couple of communications that come out and that say, the state report card said this, but look at all these other things that we're measuring ourselves by. I think it's important for us to make that matrix more. We have it. I mean, now during my time on the board here, I can clearly see how the district has those things, but that's not out there, right? I mean, people out there don't understand that there are in fact different measures and how those measures actually mesh with each other. So that's a communication thing as well, up ahead of time.
So let's go back to achievement, and then we'll move back to the language for the second goal. And it could be a third or fourth. So on student achievement, we said yes. Do we want to have a goal around achievement for our district? So you generally said yes. Want that to be a third grade goal. We got third and eighth grade is what you wrote, and one pre-K to 5. You got third grade, eighth grade, pre-K to 5.
I'll start. I think the sooner the better. Third grade makes sense for literacy. We don't want to. From the data that Emmy gives me here, from the data that I tend to remember, the earlier that they start behind, the harder it takes to catch them up for every grade level afterwards. And so we can have that third grade literacy on par, that would be a great achievement goal.
So let me,
Hey, Ray, this is Lisa, and I'm sorry, but I'm in the weeds on this one. This is a 5-year goal, and our students are not even in the system. So are we asking for systemic change or actual change? Because,
so
do you understand my question?
understand your question perfectly well, and
Thank
that's
you.
where I was about to go, so that you would understand when you're setting a goal, what that actually means. So here's what I'll make sure you understand. When you set a goal for 5 years, and it's a third grade literacy goal, what does the superintendent know they have to do in order to reach that goal? Where should I invest?
In that
Pre-K,
pre-K?
kindergarten. So as a superintendent, when you set a third grade goal, just know I don't have to set a goal for every single grade level before third grade, because the superintendent was the CEO. I'm sorry, I used superintendent CEO.
We get it.
My apologies. I shouldn't do that. What I know is that in order for me to get third graders at that goal by 5 years from now, 2 things are going to happen. First, I got to show progress toward that next year, the year after, year after. The second thing is that I know I've got to invest in second, first, kindergarten, pre-K in order to make sure that those kids will get there by 3rd grade. So when you set a 3rd grade goal, it doesn't mean you're ignoring all the other grade levels. But what it does say, to speak to the question that you just raised, and Lisa's question, you can say 3rd grade literacy, but you can rest assured that I know I've got to build to get there. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think we also all, a good handful of us reflected the importance of that pre-K investment as well, so that would be.
Yep.
Aren't
But
the
if
NAEP
you-
scores are based on 4th grade literacy? So I mean, that's where I think I put 3rd and 4th, but
Okay.
we could sync up maybe to what we're gonna be.
You can measure it however you like. So you can say 4th grade, you measure by state, you measure by NAEP, you can say 3rd grade, measure it by state, measure by some other, don't worry about the measure just yet. Just say where we want kids to be, what's our goal, what goal do we want to set? So right now, we've got 3rd grade and we've got literacy on the table.
And then you said 8th grade, but I don't know if that's too long.
Eighth grade
Third
is-
grade literacy, I think would be really important.
We also have 3rd grade math.
Would that be a separate goal? Among the 5?
It's up to you.
How about we look at the profile of the graduate, we look at the profile of the 3rd grader? Because that would be.
That'll be a strategy.
But you know what I'm saying, like that, like, I'd like to achieve.
But what we're saying,
They'd be happy.
but the profile of is determined by the profile of the pre-K or the achievement or instruction at the pre-K. So if we measure 3rd graders and they're behind, what does that mean? We got to do remedial work, and I'm not sure, it doesn't mean we shouldn't measure it, but I really think what we're talking about is focusing on earlier ages. So that when they get to the 3rd grade, the achievement is already.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think you're right, but it's about strategy, right? We're saying our measure cutoff is gonna be 3rd grade. That means you, superintendent, need to worry about not just 3rd grade, you need to worry about pre-K, K, first,
Yeah,
second.
but you can set a separate goal
Yeah.
for pre-K.
That's what I'm,
Separate pre-K.
that's what I'm
It doesn't-
saying.
It doesn't preclude setting it, because you can, same way you can set an 8th grade goal and a 3rd grade goal.
Yeah.
You can set a pre-K goal
I
and a
think
3rd
we
grade.
need a pre-K
You
goal.
can do that. That's
Yeah.
fine. And enough people have said pre-K.
Yeah,
That you're probably clearly recognizing, we got to make sure kids are starting off at higher levels and.
Yeah.
With pre-cleat in play, do we still, like, what is our license, or what? Are we saying in partnership with, or is it specifically what you want?
You're just saying, here's the goal,
Superintendent.
Mr. and Mrs. Superintendent, the goal or achieve it however you like, Mr. and Mrs. Superintendent.
did somebody steal? No, I'm looking for a booster.
Oh.
Yeah, there was here, I think somebody.
We've got a 3rd grade literacy goal. I'm gonna go on to number two. And number two, I've got eliminate, so this is what I wrote down, and tell me if this is on the right track. I've got eliminate the achievement differences between, can I say student groups? Or do you want me to say what?
I like racially equitable outcomes.
Just race?
Unless you want to include, I mean, you might want to include additional.
Yeah,
things, so that I guess
That's a fair point.
Because you did mention other demographics that such as the we didn't get the data for disabled or English, right?
But I want to see that top line going up. I don't know if it was something you said, not just taking the bottom numbers and putting them up, but having that go up as well. So I don't know if that's the same thing as what you guys are saying.
Yeah, combined with.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Time raise all those through. Rising.
It just becomes more difficult for the lower ones now because they're chasing someone who is taking off also.
So I think all of our ships need to meet, then collectively rise. If that's a realistic goal.
But that says that somebody's gonna wait for me to catch up.
Well, yeah. Yeah, no, but research shows that anytime you have those kinds of demographic differences, if you address tactics towards the groups that are being served most poorly right now and change those, then that does in fact have the effect of moving the whole thing, right? I mean, like in our particular case, if we paid specific attention to Black students, then overall performance will go up.
So I'll share two things with you. The first of which is the research shows that, but it's not always necessarily the case. But there's a bigger issue for the board. And that is if you say we want to increase the performance of Black students, what's the rest of the community going to say?
About the white kids.
I don't see my kids in that goal.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Like the district that I talked about that said we want to see African American males improve. There were community members who said, I don't see my kid in that goal. And the district had to explain, here's why. Actually, the board chair wrote an op-ed to explain, here's why we set that goal for our community. And yes, we are trying to improve. So let me back up a second. Gap closing, which is what we're talking about, and achievement are different. So if you want to improve achievement for everyone, then that's a separate goal. So if you want everybody's lines to go up, that's a separate goal than closing the gap. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So we've got a third grade literacy achievement goal for everybody.
Yep.
Is that for everyone?
Yes.
So that's all students. And then we've got and eliminate the achievement differences between. Still stuck on that.
All student demographics.
Students by in various demographics.
I would prefer a race specific goal and then a very distinct goal about English language learners and alternative ability.
Okay, so you only
That's
got
my
five.
vote.
So you got one, so race specific goal. So eliminate the achievement differences. I think you said racially, what was the terminology?
Racially equitable outcomes.
Racially equitable outcomes, if that's what you want to use. Anyone else get away then?
Do we know, do we know differences in gender?
Girls tend to outdo the boys. What I remember.
Yeah, there is a lot of research on this in every educational setting across the country. Primary school, college, girls are outperforming boys as a general rule, and they have the trajectory has like the disparity has increased over time. I have some interesting research I could share with people at a different time about that. But girls are overall doing better. I think that it's the same in the district. I will say, like when I've looked at if you go to the graduations, even you see the salutatorians and valedictorians are almost always majority girls. If you pull data from the district schools on number of students that have a 3.0 or 3.5 GPA or higher, one, we have major disparities across schools of how many kids are getting those good grades, but we also have more girls achieving the higher grades.
So you only got 5 goals, so you want to use one on.
But that I think that is like a major new thing that the whole country is grappling with. So I would struggle to say like, I think it's something to be aware of. I would not make that reducing that specific gender disparity a goal currently for the district.
The reason I feel passionately about making a distinct goal around, especially English language learners, is I spoke to a parent at Esperanza who spoke to me through a language transmitter device and said that she felt like school choice was cruel because there's only so many choices for a newcomer in CMSD that has the English language support in the school. So you have all these choices, but then you have this amount of choices for what you need.
Specific schools that they have to gravitate to.
Yeah.
And we also have a
It's a
different
resource problem, you know, so I mean, all the things we talked about, but it stuck with me because she used the word cruel, like, you tell me I have a choice, but in reality, I don't. So that's why I voted to say, could we make them two distinct goals?
You could have a separate English ELL goal that is a little different situation than a goal for what English language learner students know or are able to do. So
Yes, I'm saying I would like to focus on achievement
for English.
for
language
that, yes,
Okay.
because of.
That is on the table. It was on the table earlier, so it's one of the increased supports. So we'll move to that. So we got a racially equitable goal. Is that correct? Does everyone agree with that? Everyone's in agreement?
I'm in agreement with placeholder language.
And you can also call it
Placeholder.
Yeah,
What words?
Yeah, well,
One, a refocused outcome.
right, I mean, we're clear that this is not the wordsmithing that
This
we're
is
doing,
not the
right?
wordsmithing.
I mean, yeah.
So-
We mean that get to clear lines, right? We
That's
mean
right.
converging the lines.
Main conversion lines will wordsmith it to death. So the second thing, the second or third, so that's 2, that's gap, so we've got gap closing, we've got improving academic achievement, 3rd grade literacy, graduation rate versus graduation quality. We want a graduation rate goal first and foremost.
So yeah, I mean, both are great, but I think the quality is more important. Like I think we focus so much on like, look at our numbers increase in the amount of like graduates that we're pumping out of our districts. When it almost feels like we're just moving kids through our classes and, just districts, and they're not completely prepared for, the college classes that they're walking into or for whatever career goals that they're going to. And I think, the quality of that graduate is what's going to speak to most about our school system, their ability to not have to take as many remedial classes when they walk into CSU and know exactly what they're supposed to know by day one. Their ability to what I'll through pace, what I'll be prepared for whatever certification or other programs. I think that's.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but when I think the data shows that when voters vote for levies, the improvement in the graduation number speaks to people. So not people who do not have the knowledge that we have about. Yeah. So we would, and that does matter, back to the money and the resources, that does matter. Not that there isn't some way of taking that and.
You're graded by the state on graduation rate. They said it should be 90, whatever it is now, percent. So it becomes a goal set by the state for whoever your CEO or superintendent is. Now we can not deal with that and focus on other aspects of graduation, because whoever comes in here, they're going to understand that if I don't hit 90, what is it, 93 or something %, then I'm going to get an F. We're graduating, what, 80, 90%? We get an F every year.
Yeah, you had to get to 90.
93 or 94 or something, you know, right. So that goal is set by the state. So if we want to nuance that goal, say it should be X, Y, and Z in addition to what the state is going to grade you on, because that's the public goal that the family's going to look at, and our news articles talk about F on graduation rate, and that's all they're going to hear.
Right, so I agree, I think, well, I think it goes without saying that we want every student that walks into a CMSD high school to be able to graduate, right? That's the, I mean, and so we do have to set the highest rates that we can get in terms of what our goals are for graduation. The quality of graduation thing, I mean, you know, I was reflecting on the little bit of conversation when I first said my thing about remedial coursework. It actually is not difficult to get that in school, right? Because, you know, I think, Holly, the measure you used was SAT, ACT scores. Those are the indicators, right? I mean, if you know, those are the indicators that talk about what kind of remedial coursework the student will need to take when they go to college. So that data is actually readily available at the time of high school graduation. So it's not necessarily a lagging indicator. We wouldn't need to even go to the higher ed compact to get that. That is driven by standardized test scores.
And it's not as dependent on any shifts that are happening in policy and higher ed, which I think is useful for the
But it
district.
assumes college going.
It is, and so this actually goes to voice this at all this while, right? But I'm going to say this now because we are talking about this particular thing, right? You know, the career readiness, I think, is a great thing that all of our students should have access to. But I'm just going to state for the record that the choice of whether a student goes to college or not needs to be on the student, right? It cannot be because they were not ready to go to college, right? I think it is the job of the school to get them ready for college. If they're also ready to go and go into a career or a job right away, that's fine. But then when we use the term college and career readiness, right? I mean,
The terminology we're supposed to be using is career, and college is a pathway. That's the language that.
Can I add
should
some
be.
nuance to this? Yes, college can be a pathway to career. Yes, Nigma, like co-signing that 1,000 times. The idea is that students should be college ready, and then they choose, I am college ready. I could go to college. I could get a full ride to college because a college will want me, but I would prefer to go into this trade. I think that I would enjoy doing this more. I think that this fits what I envision for my life better. I have the option, and not because we in Cleveland have poor kids, mostly brown kids, and so we need to make sure that they're the career option, because that seems to be what is easier for us to address, or what society expects more of these students. And like the idea should not be that you're going into career because, like Nirmal said, you're not ready for college.
No, and a career doesn't mean that you don't go to college. Career means that you have an idea of what you want your career to be, and it's our job to expose kids, all kids, to what career options are.
Yeah.
Particularly in Northeast Ohio, many of those careers require that you go to college, and there's money to pay for college, and that's all good. But it isn't meant to say our kids are poor and therefore they should have a career. It is, we want all kids to have options for what careers could be. And frankly, I think if we do it right, more kids will want to go to college, not fewer. It's not meant to be a tracking of kids into a career because they're Black or brown or live in a particular neighborhood. That's not what it's.
What I'm saying is, I agree with that stated goal of PACE. I think that it's on us as the school district educating the students to make sure that it does not track them. That it is college readiness for everyone. And then you get to you have the agency about your life, but you're not being precluded from that option, or you're choosing a trades option because you don't have the other option.
So let's step
So
back.
measuring college readiness, I think through standardized tests is really important and more important than graduation, and graduation is implied in it.
So let's step back. So you're implying that you're setting goals around the quality of graduate, not graduation per se. Is that what I hear everyone saying?
Well, I don't think, no, I don't think that that's what you're saying. You're not, I'm not, at least just to clarify, right? I mean, you're not saying that you're going to be satisfied with a 75% graduation rate as long as all of the 75% is college ready. That's not what you're saying.
No,
No, right, that, I just clarifying that, because that's the sort of, potentially, they could be viewed as orthogonal, right? I mean, potentially saying that, we want every student that graduates to be ready for college
You
is one
want every
thing,
student that
right?
to graduate,
right?
but as he stated, or someone stated, I'm sorry.
Someone
It's implied that it's implied that every student that will walk through that high school door we will graduate. It's our job, it's our
Right.
job to graduate them. And it is already a state goal to graduate 90-something%. That's even 90-something% is not enough. 100% should be, our goal to graduate as students. I just don't want, us to be graduating students for the sake of just getting an A on a report card and, fulfilling that checklist. I want those students to be quality, students. And whenever I tell anybody my kid goes to CMSD, or I, am involved with, CMSD in any way, shape, or form, they don't cringe like, ooh, like you sent her, to that school. Like I want I want it to be like, oh, good, like this is a good school district, for any student to be going to.
So you want a measure. So again, what I hear you saying is that you want a measure, independent of how we word it differently, but we'll wordsmith it, but you want a measure of the quality of graduate that comes out of CMS.
Exactly.
Is that?
Ray, does it
everybody-
have to be an either or situation? Can it be a goal that's a compound sentence?
No, it could be two goals.
Yeah, that's two goals. You can actually you can do more than compound sentence and put 3 goals in one sentence with a lot of commas. But we're gonna try to limit it to just
That's what
one.
lawyers do.
Yeah, we'll put a lot-
Run it all together, sorry.
We'll wordsmith it later. So you're up to 3. So you got some measure of the quality of the graduate. You got some measure, I know we got 15 minutes. You got some measure of the achievement of your students, racial equity outcomes. You've got some measure of, so those are 3 so far. What's left on the table that you haven't addressed is pre-K. And then I'll go through the others, attendance and others, but pre-K is 1. Do you want a pre-K goal
Yes.
as a board? You got 1 person that says yes.
Yes.
You got 2 people that say yes.
Yes.
You got 3 yeses.
Yes,
Yes, but I have to see it all total, like, I'm saying yes now, but
What is?
when we come back to like restate or recap, we might be subject to change.
Can't change your mind.
Flexibility.
I reserve the right to change my mind. So we've got racial equity, equitable racial and equitable outcomes. We've got a literacy goal, 3rd grade achievement. We've got a graduation quality goal that we will craft, and we've got a pre-K goal.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking with the pre-play goal, we have to work smart, and Mr. Hurd brought up the good point of the state already having a goal, like maybe not wasting, not wasting, but wasting some of our goals.
We only have.
Already existing, like, is there already a goal that could be helping us out?
That actually drives me more toward putting it in.
Yes.
You're statement,
Yes.
because I think there's not.
Because Green for Clee is an outside organization, I think we need to talk about what we can do.
Okay,
Yeah, you actually,
Because
good points, but puts me back in the pre.
And they include private providers.
they did.
I think
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, so which we have no control,
right,
other than to
Right.
grade them and say that's a quality provider over there, but that's the end of it.
And I mean, I can personally say how I've grown in the pre-K space, like when I first got on the board, I'm like, why are we talking about preschool? You know, like, I mean, I like preschool, whatever, but then, you know, a few years, I like kids, you know, whatever. But, when like Eric probably first became our superintendent, it could have been while I was chief academic, I don't know. But when we started having the stat where the kids coming out of CMSD preschool, they're all, whatever the kindergarten readiness scores were equal to the average in the state. And when you look at our poverty scores, that's a true miracle. Like we're taking in 1 year's time, and you know, because all of our preschools are 5-star, and why is everyone flooding in? I mean, I agree completely with that, but that helped me to really frame why it is so important. Like, because sometimes, you know, that's that our kids, and I mean all of Cleveland, are gonna do better if they're in like specifically CMSD high quality 5-star.
So
I would say a high quality in general. If there are other high qualities,
If there are
They
others, but
exist,
they're
I just-
they're pretty rare, like
Yeah,
you can
okay.
drive around and go to suburbs, you see people advertising they have a 1-star, you're just like, okay,
Yep.
Yeah,
Good for you.
because 1 star is an achievement because it's not.
it's not nothing,
Yeah.
correct, yeah. But it's still not where you would probably pick to take your kid,
Right, but a lot of children attend preschools with no stars.
correct,
They
yeah,
haven't
and
even-
yeah,
More than
right,
that, never
They haven't
applied.
even-
right,
Yeah,
or they're sitting at home in front of the TV.
They're babysitters.
Yeah,
yeah,
You know, at that point, that's all they're doing, babysitting kids.
So it sounds like you're setting a goal around the quality of the pre-K, not just the number of seats.
I'm more under enrollment, but that's, my little sticker said both, but.
Okay,
I'm less concerned about CMSD in particular's quality, because I think I mean, the main thing we have is qualified teachers, that's what puts you up to the 5. But we do have a lot of open seats, and I get the kids in there, especially with the pandemic.
okay.
Get
So
a lot
we'll-
of those no star schools.
Did I just pick them up, Robert?
Yep, we're gonna take a bus over there and grab them.
So if you want to go up to 5, you can stop at 4. Right now, you've got 4 goals.
Okay.
You can stop at 4, or you can add another
I would like to add another one that's focused specifically on mental health. Student mental
one.
health.
So, so you
But
can-
I'm also biased because I made a goal.
Happy kids.
First of which is, do you want a goal around mental health? Or do you want a guardrail around mental health, saying that here's what the district, here's what the school superintendent, CEO. We need to work within. I'll ask that question in this way. The goal around mental health says this is what students will know and be able to do. And you can have a goal around mental health, but this is what you'll have to identify. We can wordsmith it later. You have to identify what students will know and be able to do with that mental health. And it's perfectly fine to do that. So we got
Would someone explain to me the difference between mental health and our emphasis on social and emotional learning?
I think
No.
social and emotional learning can impact mental health. It's a tool towards that. So if we wanted to measure mental health, we could measure social and emotional learning progress as a proxy.
I was really intrigued by the idea of student satisfaction. When we talked about this with the Post-its.
Mhm.
And if we went down this road, I would like to broaden it from mental health, social emotional learning to are students satisfied in a broad sense in their school environment.
Yeah, I think that it could lead to a lot of other things that we can measure, such as the student attendance, such as student discipline in general, and all this happy, you know.
I mean, because outside of our youth council, I'm not sure where we're getting data around what they think about school.
So I'm not saying not to set that as a goal, but my question to you, is that a measure of what students know or are able to do? If they're
It's a measure of
satisfied,
what they feel.
measure what they feel. It is a measure of what they know or are able to do. You can have it as a measure, but it'll probably be more likely to have it as a guardrail than a measure. So in other words,
Well,
and I'll get into the guardrails, but the guardrails are measurable. So you can set guardrails for the superintendent that are measurable and say, we want you to measure it by, or superintendent will set the measures. But
well,
we want you
because
to measure it by something, but the goal says, here's what students they were able to do. You can also set a goal outside of student achievement if you like. That would be a goal that is outside of student achievement, student outcomes. Perfectly fine with that. You can do that. The question is, have you exhausted all of your student outcome goals? And then you can use your fifth on something outside of
Could
student.
you remind us which?
I'd be happy
Yeah.
to. So the posters are, so we've already got this one, which was, we've got pre-K, which was over here, graduate quality, which
Got that
is
one.
here. Eliminate racial equitable outcomes, that's the gap. And then third grade achievement is here. The other one is science for 612. Increase supports for students with disabilities and ELL. Improve student supports to include mental health counselors, et cetera. Attendance and reduce summer learning loss. Those are the ones that are left.
Madam Chair, if I may, just to, because you said about going outside of, sure. Sure.
Nobody else does, so, but I appreciate the
Well, they're
consideration.
on the board.
Okay.
You mentioned about maybe having a goal outside of outcomes, and I guess I'm just thinking if the board did want now having more student outcome goals, just areas, you could have a goal around safety, you could have a goal around facilities, you could have a goal around engagement.
Know and able to do, right? What students can know and are able to do, that's the goal.
But that would be, but
So we
what
have
students,
guardrails.
right, but what students know and are able to do speaks to the student outcome.
It does.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so a goal outside of student outcomes could fall in, just, I'm just sort of throwing out some other areas you wanted to look at, would be, and among those that struck me, safety, facilities, community engagement, parent engagement, maybe social emotional. Maybe there's a social emotional goal that doesn't speak to what students know and are able to do, so maybe that's outside of student outcomes.
So does that, but that's a guardrail, right? In the language we're using.
You could make those guardrails, you could make it a goal. You could make it a goal if you wanted to, for the superintendent. They generally are better as guardrails. So for example, safety. The superintendent shall not operate schools that, are unsafe for students. And then here's the quantitative measure. You can measure, for example, how many accidents occur in schools, or how many, how many times a student is injured in school, or something like that. That's the safety measure. Or you can measure how whether students feel safe at school. So do you feel safe at school? All of those could be student measures of student safety. So you can get multiple measures of those, or you can set a goal around student safety and then say, here's how we're going to measure it.
So our enrollment for pre-K goal, is that outside of our achievement? Know what you want to do?
It could be if you wanted to. But remember, I said there's two ways to set a goal. You can set a goal around quantity, like counting how many graduates, counting number of seats in pre-K. You can set a goal around that. Or you can set a goal around what they know are able to do. So you can set goals that are outside of know are able to do. I would encourage you to set goals around what students know are able to do. But yes, you can go outside that. We only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up, but I'm going to say you've got 4. You can add one more and whatever you like, or we can go and create guardrails and say this is what the superintendent has to work within. I'm going to show you 2 other questions in the PowerPoint, just to kind of complete where we are.
Will you be giving us this PowerPoint?
I can see the PowerPoint. I can see the PowerPoint here. These questions are also questions. So there's 2 things that we did. The first of which is, what are two to three priorities? What 2 to 3 priorities? I shouldn't say what 2 to 3 priorities should the new superintendent pursue? And this one is, what are 2 to 3 levers, as Mike talked about earlier? What are 2 to 3 levers, initiatives, theories of change, constituent groups, et cetera?
It's on the screen.
Oh, it may not be on the screen. Sorry, we stopped sharing, didn't we? Escape.
You can tell who has too many Zoom meetings. See? Very good.
All right. So these are. You know that, right? So the other is, what are 2 to 3 levers or initiatives, theories of change, constituent groups that you believe the next superintendent should prioritize? I asked you those last 2 questions on purpose. All right, they were plant questions. And what I want you to recognize is, as you consider the next superintendent, we gave you a list of questions in an email as a Word document, a list of things to think about, a list of things to consider as you're interviewing the candidate. Didn't go through that in detail here, but you have that. It's a list of, here's things you should consider, look for in terms of qualities of candidate, things like that. I asked you these questions on purpose so that you would specifically say, wait a minute, if I'm responding to this and I suggest that these should be the priorities for the new superintendent, or these should be the constituent groups of the new superintendent, new CEO. Be easier if I said it the right way, right? New CEO should think through theories of change, et cetera. Those are things that you want the CEO to decide. Your job as the board is to do the first, is to set the goals and say, here's the guardrails about where this district should go. And then once you've set those goals and guardrails, the superintendent decides how they get there. Does that make sense? So that's what good governance looks like. Good governance is, we are the oversight. We set the goals, we say where you want to go, and then we're going to get out of the way and let you go there. So I asked those as plant questions, just so you could understand the distinction between what do we do as a board, and then what do we turn over as a board to the superintendent. Does that make sense? So all of those things about how to get there are superintendent questions. The priorities, how it happens, how to make sure schools are safe, et cetera. That is all the superintendent. So that's the only reason I added those plant questions. The other questions are what Mike talked about earlier. And that is how utilizing the questions in that document to say, how do we interview, look for what the characteristics. You want someone who is able to, as I mentioned, corral all the adults and move all the adults and pieces parts of the adults in an effort to move student achievement. So with that, I'll talk about next steps. We will work on wordsmithing these, and we can do that via email, creating kind of an achievement, a racial equity, a graduate quality, and a pre-K goal. We'll work on wordsmithing those goals, and then you can decide whether you want to add a 5th around social emotional learning or things like that.
The board could also choose to put up a 5th that is one of the things they gave up earlier, right? So if graduation, they wanted to have an enrollment goal or a graduation number of graduate school and a quality of graduate goal, they could go back and add that. Or
absolutely.
Similarly with other goals around ELL or students with disabilities. So they might revisit things we talked
You can
about.
add a math goal. You got a 3rd grade math goal. So we've got 3rd grade reading, we can add 3rd grade math. You can put commas in or a hand and say 3rd grade reading and math if you want. I would encourage you not to, but you could. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add as we wrap up?
Yeah, just a couple of things really quickly. One, I think at this point, while you're not finished naming priorities and levers, it's not too soon to start asking about what skills your next superintendent will need to have in order for you to attain the vision and the goals that you talked about in this session. And by the way, I thought the discussion was really first rate and very high quality. But it's not too soon for you to start thinking about how to translate how you've answered the questions for today into what skills the superintendent will need to have. Second is, as we mentioned earlier, and Ray just referenced, I also don't think it's too soon to start asking yourself about what levers are different from what you've currently been pursuing under the Cleveland plan, and what additional levers are you going to need for your next superintendent to pull or push to get you the kind of acceleration that you're looking for. And then third, I'm going to word this delicately, but we were sent a couple of days ago a copy of the mayor's listing session results. And I have to say, despite all of the kind of uncertainty in relations between the board and the mayor, there's nothing in the discussion today, nor is there anything in the mayor's results from his listening session that are terribly at odds with one another. So they don't always speak to exactly the same things, but there's nothing in the things that he is proposing that ought to give you a whole lot of pause. Now, I don't know what he means by the choice proposals that he is making, but when it comes to strengthening academics and his focus on instructions and coursework is probably exactly the same thing that you have been talking about here. And that is, do we need to strengthen the overall quality of instruction in order to maintain, if not accelerate, the gains that we've seen over the last several years? Now there are some things in what he has proposed actually won't get the kinds of acceleration that you are asking for. There's no reason why he would know what would get acceleration or to pick up the pace. This is really your work and the work of the next superintendent. And frankly, the discussions you had today are the kinds of goals and the kinds of specificity that you will need in order to get you the to pick up the pace in the ways that you have talked about. But there's nothing in where you're going and what his PowerPoint seems to suggest that are particularly at odds with one another. So to the extent that they're not at odds with one another, and you could use that to help build some trust between City Hall and the Board of Education and the school district, I would try to use that commonality of effort to your benefit and to the benefit of the kids. So, Ray, that's the only points that I would make.
Thank you, Mike. Madam Chair.
Oh, are we done here? Okay, the chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Wait, I have a question. Sorry, you mentioned next steps. We're gonna talk more about goals. When are we gonna review our? Or not our proposals?
Would you like me to?
Yes.
To that up? I believe everyone has the evaluation instrument now. You can do that online. Everybody's got electronic copies or even hard copies of the four proposals. If it's not too big an ask, I would like to ask if everyone could get their evaluations done by, say, the end of the day. When polls close on Tuesday, or say first thing Wednesday morning, and then that would give if it were the pleasure of the board, it would give the board an opportunity then to discuss that perhaps in an exec session instead of Wednesday. Because if all that stuff is entered by Wednesday morning, we should be able to have then like just applying for board summary of like where we were based on the evaluations of all those people. That makes
So
sense.
maybe get together before at like 5 or 5:30 to have that conversation. I guess that was a question, before, so the board meeting's on Wednesday. So get together before that rather than after.
Well, I'm not stopping anything, but I can't make it any earlier, 6:30.
Okay,
If I may, if you did need to meet at an executive session near the end of the meeting, I believe there are currently for your consideration just two discipline resolutions.
How long
should
is
be
the
a
rest
copy
of
of
the agenda?
It's not very,
Okay,
there's
all
not,
right.
there's not very many resolutions. There's the biggest ticket item would be. Yeah, there'd be a presentation on the 5-year forecast,
Okay,
but you're not.
Okay.
2 weeks later.
all right, so that will probably work.
And I apologize, I will be absent. I'm on vacation next week, but I did my review last night and turned them in. So it really, once you start doing it, it's not really that bad of a
Oh, you
process.
did the submittal already?
I submitted all
Right,
4.
And it went through, right? You know,
I'm good to go.
best case.
And I can be, like, I can let Robert and Ann know my thoughts. I'm, me too, so.
Is there, I'm sorry.
In my opinion.
Not me.
Oh, I'm not getting the
Yeah.
candidate, I'm just getting the search firm.
No, but he's.
but he's continuing to the search for.
Oh,
Right.
I'm not gonna tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, no, right.
Don't.
Oh, sorry.
Talk to me about.
And I won't talk to you or Lisa about anything.
Yes.
this. In no vacation.
Already scheduled.
Were you gonna ask a question?
No, I'd just like to say that I also won't pick it up, let's say, but I would also submit my.
Yes. Okay, so the chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Hearing no objection, the meeting is adjourned.